This week on NWP, it's a day-to-day new opening for the greatest show on Earth. And welcome to Nerds Without Pants, episode 133. We cover everything while bearing it all. I'm Julian, and I'm joined as always by Patrick.
I'm confused.
It's a lyric to one of my favorite Nightwish songs, which I'll get into in Consumption Junction. And Angelo.
I'm confused as well, but not as confused as Patrick.
A normal episode, then.
So the most recent Nightwish album, I didn't really love it when I first listened to it. It felt like background music. Like, it didn't really, it's one of those things where you put it in, you listen to it, and it just fades, right? Like, you're not paying attention. But once I started listening to the lyrics and stuff, like, it became, like, one of my favorite albums, and the final track is 25 minutes long. And it's basically the history of Earth from the Big Bang to the end of man. And it's called The Greatest Show on Earth, and basically the refrain is that, every day, it writes the story of our lives, and it's the opening of the greatest show on Earth every day. It's opening. That's what listeners have already heard for this episode, and I apologize if you guys don't like my Finnish metal proclivities, because I did go to Nightwish.
What?
So, like, all the music in this episode is going to be Nightwish again.
We just like cold cut it a 25-minute song at the beginning of this episode.
No, it's just gonna be like a minute of it, like the normal intro, Patrick. The outtakes, though, the outtakes will be the 25. No, I'm just, yes, we've got all sorts of things in store for you. But before we get into that, guys, we got a buttload of new reviews on iTunes. And by buttload, I mean 3.
Nice.
Let's see. First one comes in from Jesthoff, which I know that you also, started a Twitter account just to interact with us, so I appreciate it. The title is Pantsless and Loving It. And he says, "This is my absolute favorite podcast. I heard about it from the Comic Conspiracy about half a year ago and feel guilty that it's taken me this long to give it the 5 stars it deserves. Join hosts Julian, Angelo, and Patrick as they talk about the wonders of gaming from the early 80s to the modern day. Trust me, if you're a gamer of any age, you'll be happy you checked it out. I'm only 20 and absolutely adore it. It's 3 friends being cool dudes hanging out and talking about games. What's not to love? Check it out. You'll be on the No Pants train in no time." Thank you.
Damn.
You might be our youngest listener that I know of.
Yeah, 20.
I love it when people say good things about us.
I do too.
He's only a few years older than one of my children. You don't want to go down that thought path, Angelo. Just there now.
Stop. We're young men. We are young men.
Yeah.
I gotta think that one of the kids that I taught has found this out and is just listening and lurking and just waiting to say something, but hopefully they don't find it out for a few more years.
I mean, you're not doing the teaching thing anymore, so I think you're good. I think. Yeah. Next up comes from JCrest416. Title is Give It To Me, Baby. And the review reads, "I'm not a huge podcast listener, but apparently I'm missing out because this one rocks. Sometimes I wish the podcast were videotape. Hashtag Viva La Pantsless."
Nice.
You really don't want that, though.
No.
Nobody wants that. Also, again, and I've said it, we can never stream the show or anything like that, because then everybody would see how bad we are at speaking about video games, and then I just go in and make it sound a lot better, in post. If you knew the amount of likes and ums and butt ums that I cut from this show.
We're bad about that.
And long Angelo pauses.
I do that.
Sometimes I can hear his brain working
It's all in there. Just got to find it.
That pause at the beginning is actually like a shorter version of his pauses.
Yes. I don't even, most of the time, I don't even have to wait until it gets to that point in the editing. I'm just like, oh, there's one. Just cut that. Yep. There's one. Cut that.
It's a long line with like no blips on it at all. Oh, right. Yeah. Angela was talking.
Last one is our first 3-star review, but I appreciate that because, like I think I like hearing criticism as well. Like I don't want to just hear about people gush about us.
Use the entire spectrum, right?
Exactly. That's what I do when I review games.
What it's for.
I can't really pronounce this too. I'm going to say Shabetcher? Shaboopy?
Now it's a 2-star review.
The title of the review says unsure. And the review reads, I like most of the topics. Annoying part is Patrick. He goes way off topic, takes cheap political shots, strong hint of drug use, and also kind of cheap. I don't know what that means, the cheap thing.
What?
I don't know.
Does not like you, that's all.
Definitely not cheap.
I like that he said a hint of drug use, though, because I don't think there's a hint of it.
It's not subtle on our end.
I mean, it depends on the year.
Yeah, or the day.
Patrick has just a hint of patchouli oil.
Even though we're recording this like the day before 420, like Patrick is like totally sober. Review goes on. Angelo is my favorite. He has great topics and well-explained reasons why he does or doesn't like a certain game. Julian is good as the main leader, keeping the show on the rails fairly well. His vast knowledge of video games on a personal and retail side gives the show a great perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And if you're unsure, I would say stick around. Maybe go listen to some older episodes because they totally hold up. I would say that it seems that since we introduced Packwatch, people have kind of noped the show in a big way. So maybe go back and listen when we were doing Chrono Crossing, because those seem to be more popular.
And you'll get used to my creativity.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that, like, I think each of us brings something unique to the table. And I think you can tell, like, when one of us is like absent for an episode, like there's something missing. Mm-hmm. Cause it's like, we're the Triforce. Mm-hmm. We each have a different pillar that we prop up as far as video game tastes and stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't think anybody would really like it if I was just the same.
No.
Yeah. I think if we ironed you out and, like on Fooly Cooly or something and just turned you into like another one of us, like then it would just be like, oh yeah, yeah, totally. Mm-hmm.
Be like the driest show on the planet.
Yeah. I mean, that's why Julian and Angelo only shows are always like nobody cares. Like nobody comments, nobody like says anything, nobody retweets it. It's like, oh, it's one of these. Just listen and don't ever say anything about it that it ever occurred.
It's literally a couple of guys going, I know this.
Yeah. As always, very appreciative of all of the reviews. That's how we grow and adjust. And, we definitely, like, when I have gotten criticism, like, I take it into heart. Like, I know, one of our listeners was kind of talking about, like, the music breaks were too long and stuff like that. So I've tried to shorten the music interludes, just, little things like that. I can tweak the show.
See, that's personal preference. I love those episodes where like, you just put the whole song in and we can just, like, sit back and...
I usually only do that for like an ending song though, or if we're doing like a music-based episode. Like I'll definitely listen to old episodes and I'll be like, wow, Julian, this is going on a while. You should...
So self-indulgent.
Yeah.
Look at this mixing.
You should have cut this down a bit. But no, we appreciate it. And as always, if you head over to iTunes and give us a review, we'll read it on the air like we just did. That's it for all of the preamble stuff. It's time for Stage Select. This week's Stage Select is Patrick's child. So Patrick, why don't you take it away?
So yeah, this is our video game spirit animal, and I accidentally found mine and gave it away like I tend to do things at the end of last episode and couldn't think of anything else really. So
it was Star Fox,
I'm
right?
really excited just to hear about everybody else. Yeah, of course. I'm Falco.
Yeah.
You said it was a fox though.
Lombax.
Moving on.
Yeah, so I'm the last Lombax on Earth, Ratchet. But I think, what do you guys think? If you think I'm something else, but I couldn't think of anything else. I just feel like I got some kind of a robot friend on my back, jetpack kind of guy. at all times and going through space. But no, I don't know. Identify with his sense of humor and maybe am on another planet someday.
Okay, there
There it is.
Because, like, I wasn't really with you for, like, most of that, because I was like, I mean, you're creative, but I don't think of you as, like, a mechanic, dude. And, like...
Really?
Yeah. I thought you would have picked, like, a more, like artistic character, or, like, something more whimsical, like maybe the character from Journey or something, or... like something more like out there, and because like Ratchet, like I'm like,
I mean, I want to be on a super adventure like him and be like the hero of the whole galaxy.
Yeah, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the whole spirit animal thing, because I always thought it was supposed to be like something that like represents you,
but also that you want to channel, right? Like I want some of what this thing has, but it's also like I'm partially there. I don't know, like you can see some of yourself in this thing, but also it has things that you want. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, it's like, what is a spirit animal to you, I guess? So some people are more trying to channel it and some people embody it, I guess. But I guess I don't have any better one that I can think of. And I've played more Ratchet and Clank games than anything else. So I think that I've had more experiences than him and feel more in terms of what that character's like than anybody else. Except for maybe someone like Kratos, who we'll talk about later, but that wasn't by choice. That was mostly because I suck at that game.
I also think that if Kratos was your video game spirit animal, we would have to like pause this and have a really long talk.
Yeah.
But we'll get there. There's a lot of Kratos character assassination happening at the end of the show that I'm going to try to combat a little bit. But yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what did you guys figure out for your, or what were you going to say, Julian?
I was going to say, like, I can totally see, like having, like, such a long history with a character and, like, a synergy, you almost feel like you're one. So even if, like, maybe the character doesn't, you don't share, like, personality traits for that character, like, you just feel so at one with that character after so many adventures and so many hours and stuff like that, you know, I can see it from that angle, definitely. I think I took it from different angles. I have two, cause I have like more of the aspirational one, I guess. And then I have the one that's like kind of jokey, but actually probably the more accurate one.
Yeah.
What are you, a Gemini? Like there could only be two?
I'm Pisces, but, no, it was, cause I was kind of like, not sure about, like, the angle, I guess, you know, as far as, like, how to approach it and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Should I do one of them, or...
Yeah.
Okay, so...
You can't just tease us like that.
So the one that's more aspirational is, I think, because, like, he's a cooler dude than the other one that I chose. But he and I definitely share, like a lot of similarities. It's, Waka from Final Fantasy X.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Because Waka has been raised in the Yevonite faith all his life, and it has given him a rather narrow view of the world, and he looks down on anyone who doesn't share his beliefs, and as Patrick gives us a nice shot of his crotch. No pants, everybody.
I was going to say.
This is why we need to stream this. Everybody wants that, right? This is what the reviewers said. No, what? I got my running shorts on. I have no pants, of course.
Shorts are not pants.
They are not pants. Anyway, you know, Waka, he hates anyone Al-Bhed simply because they're Al-Bhed, right?
Because he's supposed to.
Right. But at the same time, like, he's not a bad dude. You know, he's not... You wouldn't meet Waka and have a conversation with him and think, wow, what a piece of shit. You know, you might think, wow, you've got some
baggage.
You know, you've got some things that you need to work out, but like at the end of the day, you're a pretty fun loving dude. You know, you're good at blitzball. You throw balls at birds to kill them, which is pretty neat. You got a great voice and like the coolest hair. So he's got some good stuff going on, but you know, as the story of Final Fantasy X progresses, he starts to realize, oh, maybe all this stuff that I have taken as like 100% true isn't 100% true, and also isn't the best way to look at things, and things are a lot more complicated than I thought. And that speaks to me in a very big way as someone who was raised in a religion that definitely narrowed my worldview in a huge way. I don't want to get into it like real big, but like one of the biggest things I think is like the Jehovah's Witness religion is very homophobic. It just is. And I struggle with overcoming that programming on almost a daily basis. And it actually took until I like started hanging out with LGBT people that I was like, oh, yeah, y'all are just people. Y'all are just good people, you know, living your lives. I was wrong. I was taught wrong. This is not, you know, this isn't cool. I think Waka goes through kind of a similar thing where he's like, oh, this is wrong. You know, this way of thinking is wrong. I can expand this and I can look back and say, oh, okay, that wasn't cool of me, you know? So from that aspect, I definitely see him as kind of like a kindred spirit.
Yeah. I can see that for sure. I can kind of relate to that to an extent because, you know, we both came up, I mean, I wasn't Jehovah's Witness, a different sect of Christianity, but,
yeah, Irish Catholic is not that far off. I
mean, but like, you know, as I got older, I was like, you know, there's other things that represent these ideals better than the way I was brought up in like these environments where you're taught to hate people, which is not okay. And I don't see how that's Christ-like at all. I just don't. Yeah. Right?
It's God is love, but only if they're like you.
Which makes no sense.
Thing. Yeah.
I was lucky to like not even know what race was until high school, and people started calling me Irish, and then I had to ask. Like,
yeah.
I was kind of so sheltered that I didn't even know that existed for a while. And
yeah, but I mean,
maybe I just didn't hear it, or it didn't matter to me. But then it just like gets ingrained in you with time, like depending on your environment. South side of Chicago, there's a lot of hate.
That's not to get too far afield, but that's one of my favorite things about Horizon Zero Dawn is the fact that the characters don't separate themselves by the color of their skin. It's more about region. So there's all these different tribes and they have different traditions and stories and ways of going about things. But in every tribe, you're going to have like every type of person. Like it doesn't matter. They don't even seem to like notice that as a difference. They're just like, oh yeah, you know, you're, oh man, I've forgotten the tribes now, but you know, you're the so-and-so tribe. Like I know that you are different from me in this way, but it's not because of the color of your skin. It's because this is what you believe about the machines versus what I believe about the machines. And I was like, that's pretty cool. And it's also, they don't hit you over the head with it. It's just like a thing that I noticed over the course of the game. I was like, wow, that's pretty nifty.
And those are the best, I think those are the best lessons that you can learn in any form of medium, right? In TV is like the lessons that they don't beat you over the head with because then you think about them, right? Like when you come to realize it yourself, it means more.
Yeah, and that's definitely like, you know, where I'm at right now. You know, I've got a pretty big axe to grind against the way I was raised.
Sure.
And that I've just been like dealing with very recently. So that's what brought Waka up to the fore.
Yeah.
I can do the other one that's a little lighter. So I don't want to bring the whole show down, but. So the actual, it's a jokey answer, but it's probably more accurate, is May from Night in the Woods. I know you guys didn't play Night in the Woods. It's this little indie game, like all the characters are anthropomorphic animals, and it's like a side-scrolling pseudo-adventure game. Like, it's really more of just like, you know, you go talk to the people that you want to talk to every day, and you visit certain places every day, and then you hang out with your band and play some music and go to sleep, and then repeat as you go through the story. But May is a college girl. She's a cat girl. She has recently come home to her small town after being in college for a couple years because she got kicked out of college for her serious anger management issues. She's a very bright girl and she has a lot of potential that she is constantly squandering because she has no sense of like personal discipline or drive. Like she's kind of lazy and, you know, just doesn't seem to have like a fire under her whatsoever. She's super sarcastic, like in the best way. Like she's just got like this super quick wit that's just like delightful. But she's also kind of a shitty person, like a lot of the times, until people point it out to her. And then she was like, oh, right. Yeah, I was being shitty. I'm sorry. And then she rectifies it. And she's also like super protective of like the small group of people that are close to her. To the point that like she'll cut them if they're, she'll cut you if you like, threaten them in any way. So, she's got a lot going on. And, as I was playing Night in the Woods, I was like, damn, if this doesn't hit home, like in a really big way.
Nice.
She's a really, I really liked her as a character. I like all the characters in that game, but May definitely takes the cake, and as she should, since she's the main character. But also, I love like every day when she wakes up, she's just like bleary eyed and like scratches her side, and she's just seems like so not about that waking up life, which I am right there for.
Yeah.
Waking up is the worst.
Yeah. I'm not a morning person.
It's bad. When I was growing up, like it was a constant war with my mom. Like she would have to start like an hour before, like, and she would just be like, Julian, get up. Julian, get up. And then like 5 minutes later, Julian, you're gonna be late. Get up. This was every day. I don't know how she did it. Every day of school for years. We're talking like 7 years of that. Easy.
My parents didn't have time for that. They gave me 2, and then there was cold water coming my way. Like that would be a thing that happened.
Oh yeah, my mom was way too kind. She should have been stricter than she was.
Yeah. And I wasn't doused with a bucket of cold water. It would be like a little Dixie cup with some water in it, just splash my face. Like, you're getting up now, boy. Like that kind of thing.
Just spray you like a cat.
Yeah.
Come on,
really louder yells, but damn. We would only do that water stuff to other people on like sleepovers.
Oh man, we did a whole church thing where they did these like winter camp things. I don't know if you guys, probably not in Texas, this is not a thing, but they would do it was called snow camp. And one guy one year was in a room with what's that?
What's snow?
Yeah. With
summer camp
with one of his friends, and he took the guy's pillow and hung it out the window like the entire time. So they came in, he took the pillow, hung it out the window, closed the sill on it, and then they went out all day. Now it's below freezing outside, so at night, right before everybody's coming in, he runs up to the room, grabs the pillow, throws it on the bed. The pillow is actually frozen solid at this point. The guy goes in, just like puts his head on the pillow, goes, "Oh, it's like ice cold, it's a little bit wet, it's frozen." It's pretty good.
As someone who lives in Texas, like the thought of like an ice cold pillow sounds so good right now.
Yeah.
Not the wet part, but like the ice cold part. Oh.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I think it was snowing too, so it got a little wet.
Yeah.
That's kind of miserable.
I'm not there for that, but the cold part, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be good, like if you put your head in a freezer when it's like the middle of summer.
Oh, hell yeah.
That's a good thing. I distinctly remember working in some kitchens during the summer and going to spend a few minutes in a cooler, like those nice big walk-in coolers. Those were good times.
I got locked in one of those coolers at my first job. I was stocking milk, or no, I wasn't stocking because I didn't stock, but I was doing something in there in the milk refrigerator, and the door wouldn't open, and I was back there for like good 20, 30 minutes before, because I think it was during the day, so it wasn't like super busy. And then finally somebody went to get some milk, and I was like, excuse me, ma'am. And I saw her like do the thing, like, what? Whoa, what's going on? I was like, yeah, I'm stuck back here. Could you go up front and tell somebody to please open the door?
I think I had too much milk.
And I didn't hear the end of that for weeks, obviously.
No, that's a good one. Are we on me now?
I think so.
All right. I don't know. Like, I was trying to think of this one, and I'm going through my favorite video game characters. I'm like, is it Mario? No. Is it Mega Man? Not really. And then it kind of hit me. It's a little newer than I would imagine, but definitely Shovel Knight.
Go on.
The dude likes camping. Yeah, he's always got these scenes where he's sitting out by a campfire, but there's just, I don't know, he's very headstrong, very sort of, in a way, he's single-minded, and that's kind of something that's a positive and negative quality that I have. You know, he can get real determined about stuff, kind of a thing I have. But like in this particular case, he's the aspect of him that it's like I would aspire to would be like the heroic side, right? Like I'm not some guy who can go off on a massive quest to save someone's life, but man, I kind of wish I could.
Right.
And also his weapon's a shovel, and that's just kind of great. But also just even as far as video games go, like he embodies a lot of just all these different qualities from all these different, there's Mario in there, there's Mega Man in there, there's DuckTales in there, there's all these little 8-bit games that I loved that like were very formative that are sort of wrapped up in this one, a more modern character, but he's got all those qualities too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely your type of adventure.
Yeah. But also, I mean, like he's doing all this for, I mean, essentially his soulmate, right? Like it's Shovel Knight and it's Shield Knight, right?
Yeah.
And they don't say that like they're married or anything crazy like that, but you get the impression that they are a team, have been a team, will always be a team, and he's just lost without his partner. And that's kind of how I am, right? Like I've got my family, I'd be lost without them. It didn't take me long to get to the point where like my wife and I are just like different parts of the same person. And if one of those parts were to be missing, it would just not be right. And I would have to fix that, So there's another part there that I really strongly relate to. So.
It's a great feeling to have.
It is.
And I thought you were going to talk about your shovel.
I've also done a lot of yard work that I've talked about on the show.
If that's what you call it.
Yeah.
Were you trying to do some sort of crude euphemism? Didn't quite work.
It went right over my head.
I was happy with the one, but like when Patrick first got on tonight, he was like, "I need a soft 5," and I was like, "I've got a hard 6."
Yeah, I had a Pope. No, so I was thinking about it. I needed to further defend my choice because, okay, Ratchet uses all the tools out there for destruction, and I use all the tools in my life not only to like, I don't know, research things, but also to self-destruct. And, Ratchet actually is closetly artistic. If you get all the way to the end in the game, which you can unlock like the art galaxy planet or the art planet, where there's like a bunch of different statues and art pieces like throughout like the games and stuff, where like the developers give little comments on it. But like he's got his own little collector's realm as well. So he's not like just a mechanic. And although I do like Gran Turismo, that's just like that's his origin, what he was fiddling with. I think it's more of like a metaphor for like Ratchet was tinkering like with time before there was something for him really to do. And
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I like it. I respect him a lot.
Yeah. So. Yeah. And again, like I think it's a good choice. It's just, my mindset for the topic is what threw me off. So. But once again, like we all, we came at it from very different angles.
Oh yeah.
as we are wont to do.
Did any of our listeners come at it from angles? Or?
They did. First up over at pixelbit.com was Superstep, who says, honestly, Kazuma Kiryu. That's the main character from Yakuza.
Yep.
He says, I often feel older than I really am, which seems to be a theme with that character. I'm also pretty driven by deeply coded morals, despite not always hanging around people who share my ideals. Most importantly, I can be really goddamn dramatic about picking up a phone.
Nice.
I've gotten to the part where he answers the phone in Yakuza 0, and it's phenomenal. He says, I'm probably more of a jokester than Kiryu, but I'm definitely not Majima crazy. He can be pretty one note on some days, so I'm still going Kiryu. You're a lot cooler than I am, Superstep.
Well, Well, with a name like Superstep.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because, as I was playing Yakuza 0, when they introduced Majima, even though he is kind of the zanier character, there's definitely parts where he's like, and keep in mind, like, I think like in Yakuza 0, he's like 25, but he's definitely got like a, oh, I'm too old for this shit type of mentality. And I'm like, I totally like identify with that, because I was definitely one of those kids who was 13 going on 30. Just always. Like I always hung out with people who were older than me. I always got along with people who were older than me. That's just always been the way that I was, until now, where it's like, now I can kind of, I think because like emotionally or like maybe not emotionally, socially, I'm kind of 10 plus years behind. So I can kind of like feel right at home with people that are in their 50s, people that are in their 40s, people that are my age, and also people in their 20s, because like I feel that like, you know, I kind of run the gamut as far as like, I still appreciate people that are older, but I also feel so behind that I'm like, no, I got you, 22-year-old. I totally identify with what you're talking about right now. But that's a good one. Thank you, Superstep.
Yeah, do you know what I was thinking? How perfect it was for his choice. If you just do a portmanteau of Superstep and Kazuhiro, you have Superhero.
Nice.
That is good.
I also like a good portmanteau.
Yeah.
I like a cigar and a nice portmanteau. That was a pun. Next up is Tyrone Swift, who says, I'm sorry to pick such an obscure character here, but I've thought long and hard about this, and I have to pick Jill from Valhalla. That's the VA-11 Hall A that we had talked about recently. Cyberpunk bartender action. He says, I don't think I've ever related to a character as much as this one. She speaks sarcasm, buys things to keep herself happy, has a random interest in Japanese pro wrestling, and just has a very go-with-the-flow attitude. I continuously found myself saying, yep, that's exactly what I would have said there while I was playing this game. Hell, she even has a smoking habit she's not proud of. The author of this game needs to get out of my head. I can think of no better video game spirit animal than her. That's good. I like that.
That sounds like a very interesting character, and I keep having people tell me, oh, hey, this game is great, you should check this out, and I just keep going, I don't know, another visual novel, really? It's not going to be, like, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a wild ride like the Zero Escape ones, or Danganronpa or something like that. It seems like it's going to be kind of
Danganronpa.
Yeah, but that sounds just like from that light little bit of description. I was like, that's some good character development, just even from that brief outline. That's an interesting character.
Mm-hmm. That makes me a lot more interested in it.
Yeah.
Is it a Western developed game?
I don't know.
Because it almost sounds like Western, but then when you told me that it's a visual novel, I'm like, well, there's not really. Well, that's not true. I guess it's like the whole like Gone Home genre is almost like a visual novel, except that you don't, that you're actually navigating through the space, but the core of it is similar. That was like
a short story that you can go through a few times, with slight differences, but
yeah.
Even that was like too long for its own good.
I still want to play that one.
It was pretty good, but it's just like those games, for some reason, even when they're going fast, seem slow in comparison to what you're used to. And there's like this internal conflict that I have as a video gamer where it's like these things are going normally 5 to 10 times this speed and I have to act on the fly, but now I'm just watching it and waiting.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that the whole time.
I was trying to figure out what it was, and I think you might have actually accidentally just told me that made me think, man, why don't I like games like Ethan Carter? When I played The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, I was like, all the story beats in here and all the little bait and switch things and the twists should be pulling me in, and it's not. And it's because it's the gameplay part of it is so slow, right? That it just bores me. And when I'm playing 999 or Virtue / Reward, I'm constantly reading or I'm solving a puzzle. There's no downtime where I'm just, and don't get me wrong, Ethan Carter was a gorgeous game. It was beautiful. Like everything about that game was nice to look at, and there were times where I stopped and just stared at the scenery, but the actual gameplay of it was slow and kind of monotonous, and it's just, that's where it falls apart, and I feel like I'd feel the same way about Gone Home or any of those other ones where there's downtime, but it doesn't feel like well thought out or satisfying downtime. It feels like downtime because, I don't know, it just feels appropriate to have downtime here. It's like, no, this is a video game. I want to be playing a video game, you know?
Right.
So.
How do you guys feel about audio logs, like in BioShock or Batman Arkham Asylum and stuff? When I come across those, I immediately stop and just let them play because I don't want any of the other like game audio to clip into it or anything. So it almost like, even though these games are like very low on cutscenes, those definitely stop the gameplay for me. But I don't know if like maybe you guys are more like, oh no, I just keep on trucking and then just let it play in the background.
No, I stop and listen, and that's different too, because I'm doing something there, right? Even if I'm stopping and listening, now I'm just focusing on this story and listening to it. What I'm saying is there's long stretches of time in all of these other games where there's nothing to focus on.
Right.
You know, I've already seen the scenery, I've already done this, I've already done that, I'm just trying to get from point A to point B and figure out what to do next. But it doesn't feel like a puzzle either. Like, it doesn't feel like I'm trying to solve a riddle to figure out what I need to do next. It just feels like, well, I got to just keep bumping into walls until I get there. And that's not really fun.
I know, like, you keep getting recommended these types of games, even though, like, you're not a big fan of them. But I still think that if you can find Firewatch on a cheap sale, like, you should check it out.
Okay.
Because I think it...
I haven't played through it.
It's so good, but I think it mitigates a lot what Angelo is complaining about, in the sense that as you're moving from point A to point B, that's when the conversations happen between your character and your supervisor over the radio. And that stuff is so good. And I also like the fact, as someone who's getting older, dude is like 37 and kind of schlubby.
Yeah.
And like, how many characters in video games are 37 and schlubby? Like, it was just kind of neat to see.
I gotta say, I used to like audio logs a lot more when it was like a new and inventive way to tell a story, and now I feel it's kind of like standard, sometimes just thrown in there haphazardly, and I don't care about them sometimes now. Like, I really didn't, honestly, with Wolfenstein so much as the gameplay itself. It's kind of fun to find those things, and it's nice to go back and really sit there and listen to them if you like the characters a lot, like I did with Pyre. But some of the times you just feel like there's no reason for it, or like it's just shoehorned in. And I like how it's like optional story that I don't have to go through sometimes, or like sometimes, like after the first 100 books or something in Elder Scrolls, even I'll just flip through it a little bit. Like I'm gonna skim a couple.
Oh man, like I picked up Skyrim on Black Friday last year for my Xbox One to finally try to give like a Bethesda game a pretty decent go at it. And I do like the combat far better than the other Bethesda games that I've played, but dude, those books are too wordy by like 3/4. I'm like, okay, this is cool. This is neat lore. Let me flip the page. Wait, that's not the end? There's more? I just kept flipping and flipping and flipping. It's like, I ain't got time for that. I am sorry. Like, I'm sure this is very interesting lore, and it probably fleshes out the game in a way the storyline doesn't, because so far there hadn't been much story, but I like to read with a book in my hands, sitting on a comfy couch, not paging through virtual books on a screen. I'm sorry.
When I played Morrowind, I read all those books. I mean, I read all of them. But I had way more time back then.
Right. Then when I got to Oblivion, it was less. And then when I got to Skyrim, it was like, just give me some dragons.
Yeah. I read every codec entry for Mass Effect 1, and then Mass Effect 2, I was like, oh, a lot of this stuff is repeating, so let me just read the new stuff. And then Mass Effect 3, I couldn't even be bothered. Moving on to next comment is from San Andreas, who says, I guess the closest thing I ever had to a gaming spirit animal was Squall from Final Fantasy VIII. I was a lot like him when I was a teenager, though the game came out when I was 21. I was a lone wolf who didn't really want to be a lone wolf like Squall. I had extremely poor social skills like Squall, and I was sometimes a belligerent jerk like Squall. Squall even looked a bit like me. Well, I didn't have the face scar, and I didn't wear a leather jacket with a fur collar, but you get the idea. Okay, I'm glad that San Andreas said it, because, like, Squall's got issues.
Right,
so I'm glad that it, like, San Andreas wasn't like, oh, I was a badass like Squall, and, I was really good with a sword like Squall, and it's like, no, Squall's got problems.
Yeah, I'm like, you may have already been dead halfway through the entire game like Squall.
That's interesting, because I don't feel like... So when I played that game, I didn't get the impression that Squall was a flawed character. I just got the impression that Squall was a jackass. You know what I mean? Like, when you think about it, when you explain it that way, I'm like, that makes him a little more sympathetic, right? I wonder if I wasn't looking at him with the right lens back when I played the game. And part of that might be the localization, too, right? Because localizations were not that great back then.
Yeah.
So they were trying to bring across this character who was probably just like deep down a real good guy, but had a hard time expressing himself. And, you know, maybe it carried over better in Japanese than it did in English. Like it's a trope, an established sort of stereotype over there where it's not necessarily here. So we didn't really get it.
Yeah. And that was my thing and my frustration is, and you know, cause I'm 19 when that game came out and it was billed as this big romance story, but I still wasn't used to the Japanese romance story, which is the whole, like, the main character, the guy is brooding and angsty and, you know, the girl just wants him to notice her and they'll hem and haw about it forever. And then nothing ever really happens between them. It's just sort of kind of implied that they get together, you know, after the credits roll. And it's like, that is not a satisfying romance by any means. But the more that I got into like anime and manga and stuff, and I mean, granted, I'd already been reading a lot of it, but I guess I wasn't reading the right type or watching the right type of anime at this point. Yeah, now I kind of understand it, but it's like, guys, just say how you feel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
She's sitting on your lap on a spaceship in space.
Yep.
There's no better time to kiss the girl.
Or like, at this point, how is there any subtlety left? Once girl has been applied to lap.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I feel like we've definitely crossed the line where we can talk about our feelings. Like, once this has happened.
It's like that applied directly to the forehead.
Yeah.
Apply directly to the lap. Everything will be fine.
It's like, oh, hey, this isn't subtle at all.
Lastly, over at Pixelbit is one from Xrian, who also commented that he was having a really bad day when the last episode went up, and he was super happy that the show went up on time because it got him out of his bad day. So that, I appreciate that. And
that's cool.
I'm sorry that I've been getting them up late. But he actually said that there's only a couple podcasts that can turn a day around for him, and ours is one of them. So that's high praise.
That's important.
Yes. You have no idea. Xrian's comment is Rost from Horizon Zero Dawn. He says, without going too deep into my search, I think Rost is my spirit animal. He was honorable and faithful to his family. He doesn't mind being a loner and will take on a burden for the sake of others. When pushed, he wasn't afraid to do what was needed to achieve justice for those who lost their loved ones. I really liked his character in Horizon. He's a character that you don't get to spend a lot of time with.
Right.
But it is pretty interesting to me that, especially with the way that, man, I can't believe I've forgotten the tribes. Like, I was so into that game. But Aloy's tribe, well, I mean, they're outsiders, basically. And so, for him to take her on as his responsibility, especially as you get further into the game and realize, like, who she is and where she comes from and stuff like that, and how taboo it was for him to take her on, like, that's, like, a really cool character trait. And also, like, I think the neat thing about him finding comfort in her and vice versa, because they're outsiders and they really don't have anybody else and nobody wants anything to do with them, is like a nice little snapshot of a relationship.
Neat. I haven't played the game, so I can't really comment on the...
Right.
Sorry.
Is he only, I mean, I guess I can't, this would be a spoiler too, but is he only in the beginning right there?
He's in like the first big part of the game. So right up from the tutorial up until the world opens up. So it's a pretty decent chunk of the game, but when the game is like 60 hours, you know, it's not that much time. It's probably like the first like 4 or 5 hours.
Right.
But you get a good amount of time with him, before you move on to the bigger part of the world. I
was going to say, I'm looking forward to playing that game. It's just, I keep buying other games and I have a backlog, and what am I doing?
Right.
So.
It's something special. I keep thinking about it in terms of how well the side quests were designed. Just the way that they each tell like a really good story and stuff like that. I was thinking about that as I was, like replaying the beginning of Final Fantasy 15 because I bought the Royal Edition for Xbox One. And still just like so annoyed with the come up here and get this quest and then go out and kill 3 of this thing and then come back and turn this quest in type of design versus like Horizon, where it's like, no, each one of these side quests is like a little story with like characters that are going to mean something to you. And it's also, Yeah, and I haven't played enough of The Witcher, but I've heard it's that way. And also, the Dragon Quest games are that way. So that's one of the reasons that Dragon Quest XI is like probably my most anticipated game of the year, is because it's going to be a really big, pretty RPG, but then also I'm expecting all these neat little vignettes with every town where it's like, oh, I solved this person's problem, and I remember them even hours later and stuff like that. Like, Dragon Quest XI might actually be the Final Fantasy 16 that I want.
Yeah, I know that the fact that it's coming out on Steam is probably good for the game, but I really wanted to play that on DS, if I'm totally honest with you.
Yeah, I wanted both because they actually had like cross save.
I know.
So I'm bummed about that.
I'm bummed too.
Let's see. Over on Twitter, and I will say, to listeners, like, a lot of people on Twitter have been using the DMs, which I think is really cool. You know, you may not have time or be able to, comment on Pixelbit, but, you know, we've got the DMs open to everybody, so that seems to be like a really good way for people to get the longer comments to us. So, keep it up. First one is from, Jeffrey Struckoff, who is one of our new reviewers. He's on Twitter at JESTHOFF. He says, all right, I got it. This one took a good amount of thought. My video game spirit animal is definitely 100% without any doubt Cranky Kong. You go to him for advice and he'll give it to you, but not before giving you a big heaping of sass along with it. He's smart, funny, and somewhat of a jerk at times, but he truly cares for those he loves, and that just sums me up pretty nicely. Also, he owns a museum and is a curator. That's one of my dreams. Not to mention he's actually an animal, so there's that.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, I think if you're 20 and you're identifying with Cranky Kong, you might also have something in common with Superstep and Kiryu, because damn.
I like it, though.
I do, too. It's really good.
I think everybody has a little bit of Cranky Kong in them, if they're going to be totally honest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he's so cranky.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see parts of me in that, too. It's like you just get frustrated and you want to hit people in the head with a stick and, like, kind of give them passive-aggressive advice.
Right. Lastly, I thought we had one more, but it's actually it's for Packwatch. So the last one we have on Twitter comes from our buddy Mike Fallick, host of the Let's Start a Cult podcast, at Big Little Weasel. He says, this is the most difficult stage select ever, because I play a lot of RPGs, so I felt as though I was role-playing those characters. I really did fight Red at the top of the mountain, but that whiny dumb kid who needs to be taught how to catch a Pokemon, a spirit animal, me? Not really. I'm stuck between Corvo of Dishonored and Groose of Skyward Sword. The theme is the same. Hero who follows his heart despite his great power and ends up being overly emotional in the process. I'll go Groose because of my amazing hair. Patrick, who's Groose?
What?
Who's Groose?
He's like an annoying, buff guy.
He's from Skyward Sword.
The bully at the beginning?
He's the bully in Skyward Sword, yes.
Okay.
But there is sort of a redemption thing with him to an extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
And, okay, one last one, and I'm not sure if he wanted me to read this, but I thought it was funny. My friend Joe from Colorado says, I don't have a spirit or video game spirit animal. I got lost in the woods and was forced to eat him. He was delicious. So, don't know what to make of that.
That's all right.
But, he texted that to me, I guess, after he listened to the last episode. So, yes, that's it for stage select. Holy crap! It's the shortest stage select ever.
Nice.
Thank you, Patrick.
Well, it was intentional.
Only an hour long.
Yeah, it was, I mean, it's supposed to be like that. It's short, simple, and you should be able to, do your elevator pitch.
It should. It's just, and I think it's a failing of me as a host that I'm like, I'm just going to let this ride. Let's just keep on talking.
I mean, in this case specifically is what I mean. Like, you either know your spirit animal or you don't.
True. That's very true. Well, Angelo, you have the next crack at stage select. I hope you got something good for us.
I do. At least I think I do. So, I haven't been a wrestling fan for a little bit of time, but I still like wrestling, at least from what I remember of it, like in the 80s and whatnot. Basically, if you think of when WWE was WWF, that was when I was into it.
Right.
Same.
Yeah. So, and it's still cool. Like, I remember there was that league over in Texas that you sent, like the amateur league, that was really good.
Oh, Inspire Pro. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're still really good.
I watched some of their stuff and I was like, this is fun. Like, I still get it, right? I'm just not into it. But anyway, I thought it would be kind of fun. So this is actually just everybody. Well, for us, we're only picking 2, but I guess I have to do something a little bit different for our readers or listeners. I want us to pick.
You can read the dictation if you want.
Yeah, I want us to pick entrance music for the other hosts. So I will pick entrance music for Patrick and Julian as if they were wrestlers.
Excellent.
And then Julian will pick it for Patrick and myself. And, if you are a listener, I will get it correct. Just whoever you think of, you can do all 3. You can do 1 or 2. It's whatever. But I kind of want to do this whole thing with us. I think it'll be fun.
This is going to be really fun.
Yeah.
Do you pick other entrance songs that exist, or ones that could exist, or doesn't?
Well, since we're a video game podcast, I was hoping it would be video game music, but I don't want to limit that too much because I don't know. I listen to a lot of video game music, and not everybody does, and I understand that, and I want people to be able to have fun. So, something along those lines.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I wasn't sure if you wanted the Undertaker's theme song or something.
For who?
Oh no, he means like an actual wrestler.
Oh
theme song.
No, don't. Actually, I would say maybe don't use already used stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I already did all of that with the SmackDown creator wrestler. I came out to One of a Kind, which was Rob Van Dam's theme song at the time. That was what my version of me. I still have the memory card, actually. If you want to see Julian Titus circa 2003 in video game form, the game room isn't set up, but I should actually try to load that up and just take a Twitter video or something, because it's pretty funny. I was wearing, I'm wearing the shirt of the Hurricane, which was my favorite wrestler at the time. And literally that was a shirt that I owned. So there would be times when I'd be running that character in the store, and I'd be wearing that exact outfit.
Oh, that's fun.
So yeah. The good thing is that you're going to have a lot of time to think about this, because I am going to be out of town. Well, I won't technically be out of town when we're supposed to record next, but I won't be able to edit. So we're going to have to take a miss. Don't worry, listeners. We're going to have something that comes out around that time. It's just not going to be a regular episode. So we're going to want these submissions by 7:30 Central Time on May 17th, which I know is a long time away, but that's just the way things are shaken out, unfortunately. So you can go to pixelbit.com and comment in the show thread for episode 133, or hit us up on Twitter at NWPcast. I'm actually really curious to see what the listeners think or come up with for us, because we know each other. We talk outside of the show, and we know our stories and everything, and we know what we look like too, kind of how we visually react to things. So but the listeners don't have any of that. So it's just based on this bullshit that we put out every 2 weeks.
Man, I still don't know though. Maybe that's even more confusing.
Maybe I'm gonna have to put some thought into it. But I think I've already got Angelo's. I might already have Angelo's. Pretty.
I have Patrick's. I have Patrick's for sure.
Is that why this started? Better not be Crazy Train.
No. It's from a video game. Mine are all going to be from video games because,
That's cool.
Awesome.
That's cool.
This is going to be fun.
Can't wait.
All right, so that does it for Stage Select. Thanks to everyone who submitted, as always. For now, we're going to jump into Consumption Junction.
I wish I had an angel for one moment of love. I wish I had your angel tonight.
Deep into a dying day, I took a step outside an innocent heart, prepared to hate me for when I may. This night will hurt you like never before. Love stayed I heart.
And I really mean to like ask you guys like what we've got on deck before we start recording, so we can have kind of like an idea of what to do. But we kind of just wing it.
Yeah.
I really don't have much. I've got a story that I can tell and something about a comic book, but other than that, I don't got much. Did anybody play any video games in the last couple weeks?
I played video games.
You did, really? Now, Angelo, video games are played with a controller on a video game console on a television. They're not on a board on a table.
How about a mouse and a keyboard?
That's acceptable.
Okay, good.
Oh, that is on a board.
It is a board. It has board in it. No, I still play a lot of video games. I do.
No, I know. It's just like for the last like 8 or 9 months, like you've been like really hard into the board game stuff. Not as much lately, but
yeah. I mean, I like them both a lot.
Yeah.
So I've been on sort of a kick with the Diablo-like games lately. I don't know where this came from, like the action RPG loot games, more or less. Last time we talked, I had been playing Borderlands 2, and I had said that I do not like that, and then I had switched over to Torchlight 2. And I was at work, because I work in IT, so I'm surrounded by geeks. And I was talking about, yeah, it's great. I was talking about it, and one of our coworkers, one of the newer ones actually, was like, "Have you played Path of Exile?" And I was like, "I have not." And then he described it to me, and the fact that it's free, and I was immediately very, very interested. So Path of Exile is a Diablo-style loot game where you have a character class, pretty straightforward, right? Like it's your typical kind of archetypes for one of these games. You've got your sword and board type of, grab a giant stick and beat things with it and have a shield. You've got a magic user. You've got a ranged character, which is the one I played, all the other ones. But what makes this different is there's a few different things. One, there's no gold. There's no standard currency, right? The plot of it is it's Path of Exile. You're exiled. You're on this island somewhere. And money is not a thing. You're exiles, right? So you are trading with whatever you have there. And what the characters trade with are basically these things that allow you to augment your weapons. So you can use these things to, say, add extra slots to a weapon or change the properties of a weapon, or you can use them as currency. They do various things, and there's maybe a dozen of them. So there's all these different ones. And that's kind of a neat idea, right? You buy stuff with these, you sell things and get these in return. Depending on what you sell, you get different ones. It's a neat concept, and it makes sense with the theme, and it also kind of makes sense with the free-to-play model. And the free-to-play model was not intrusive at all, actually. I never felt the need to spend money at all. Really neat. The other things that make it unique are the upgrade path. So you get your weapon, and your weapon has your typical stats and the typical rarity that you'd find. But it also has materia slots, essentially. You've got little holes that appear on the weapons, and they are color-coded, and some of them are linked. And you've got certain ones that will add an attribute to a main one, and certain ones that are just main ones. So you have your ones that grant you additional attacks. So if you're a magic user, this one will make you cast a fireball. If you're a ranged user, this one will give you an ability where you shoot poison arrows, right? And then you can augment that with other ones. So right now, the main attack I use is I have an archer who shoots an arrow, but the arrow then splits into 5, and also that is augmented with every single time one of those connects, a ghost archer spawns and also makes an attack.
Nice.
So I basically am running around shooting things with another thing that's over my head also shooting things. It's fun, and you can chain this stuff together like that. You can give things elemental properties. It just goes on and on and on. It's a materia system. They also gain levels like materia does, and as they gain levels, they get more powerful. Your ability.
When you say as materia does, do you mean with reference to Final Fantasy VII?
Yes.
Or
Final Fantasy VII specifically. You are also your ability to equip them is dependent on your character's stats. So, for example, if I wanted to use magic, I would have to have a high intellect stat, which, since I'm a range user, I have a high dexterity. I don't have a high intelligence.
Right.
So I can use all these things that are dexterity based, but none of these things that are intelligence based, and a little bit of the strength ones. So that's kind of how that breaks down. When it comes to upgrading your passives, which are your actual stats, you're not allocating skill points, which I love. I find nothing drier and more boring and more frustrating than allocating skill points. I don't like it. I have never liked it. So what this game does is it gives you a very Final Fantasy X-like sort of a sphere grid. There's, at least in my experience, there's a very obvious path for you to take. Like usually you'll even find, if you look at the grid, you'll find where your character starts. All the characters start in a different spot on this massive, massive web. But you'll also find little emblems of various weapons. And there's a path to get from like your character to the weapon. So for example, if I'm using bows and arrows, which is what I'm using more than anything else, I will find on one of the ends of this thing bows and arrows and a whole lot of dexterity bonuses between this and that, right? And all sorts of little abilities to pick up along the way. And generally speaking, from your character to the weapon you want to focus on is all the stuff you want to pick up. And then from there, you can like splinter off into, well, I want a little more strength, so I'll go this way and get these abilities here. It's a really smart system. It will take you a few minutes to wrap your head around it. It doesn't come intuitively because it's, you know, I've only seen it. I made the comparison to Final Fantasy X because that's really the only other game I've seen it done well in. I mean, they tried to do it in Final Fantasy 13 and they didn't do it right. Like they screwed up their own system, which is kind of hilarious. And then they tried like the license board, which didn't quite work out either. This is like that, like Final Fantasy X one. I think it's better, but obviously, you know, they were inspired by it, so they could go, oh, here's where we didn't like about that. Let's not do that, right? When you're basing it off of. So that was a lot of fun. I put about 30 something hours into that game. Had a lot of fun with it. It got a little dry to me. Like it's kind of a typical story, that kind of thing. It is fun. The only reason I put it down is, I recently went out and had, some surgery done, and don't freak out, it's not a big deal. It was just, I had to get like a mole removed, and, you know, you kind of feel a little weird after that. I'm like, you know what would make you feel better? I need to buy a video game. So I went to the local GameStop, and by the way, shout out to the Amsterdam GameStop. The manager there is actually a really cool guy. He's actually like knowledgeable about video games and stuff, and we ended up talking. I went in there and like bought a Steam gift card, and he's like, so what do you think about buying? And I told him, and he didn't try to like pitch me on anything ridiculous. He was just like, oh man, that game sounds cool. I've been looking into that. And I said, oh, so you're familiar with that? He goes, dude, I got a tattoo. So he has a Warhammer 40K tattoo. I'm like, all right, this is my kind of guy. So I ended up sitting there, spending some time there talking to him. Like I used to at the game store when I used to work in Troy. There was a game store there. I used to spend time like almost daily talking to the people that work there and just having a good time there. So I talked to this guy for a bit until the place got busy, and I was like, all right, I'll see you later. But I picked up that and used it to buy Warhammer 40K Inquisitor Martyr, which I've talked about on the show before.
Yeah, that you brought it up last episode, and it was that early access game. So when you said it was early access and you said it was $50, I was like, whoa, that seems crazy for an early access game. But then as I was editing, I was like, oh, let me go look at some footage. And I looked at the footage and I was like, holy crap, this does not look early access. No. This looks like a finished game to me.
It is a beautiful, beautiful game. It is definitely pushing my computer, and I can't run it at max settings. Like, there's heart and soul in this thing, right? It's not like an indie project. This is I'm not trying to dump on indie projects. I love a lot of indie games too. But I mean,
this has scope.
It does not feel like a small team put this together. And it is a fairly small team for what they're doing, if I'm going to be totally honest. Yeah, and its scope is massive. Where do I want to begin here? So I ended up...
The races.
Well, it's 40K stuff. You're an Inquisitor, so you are a human. You do not get to choose any other race, because the Inquisitors are only from the Imperium. So, but you can choose 3 classes, and then from those 3 classes, there are 3 subclasses of each one. So there's Crusader, which is your big, tanky, I'm a soak up damage and smack things in the face class. But they also all have range because they all use guns because this is 40K. There's I forget what they are. I think it's an assassin, which is your agility-based class, which I didn't go with, oddly enough. And then, of course, there's your psyker, which is your magic class. So those are the three. And then all three of those have subclasses as well. So I went with a heavy gunner subclass for a crusader. So I have this hulk of a dude walking around in super heavy armor with just big, heavy assault weapons, and I'm having a good time.
Nice.
So I have never experienced an early access game before, and that was part of the reason I wanted to do this. The other part of the reason is I'm really feeling the loot grab ARPG right now, and this is one of those in probably my favorite fantasy universe. So This is a thing that's happening. It is real neat to see games with like the facade still sort of not in place and the scaffolding up, and maybe not all the windows are in yet, like that sort of thing. It's real cool. You get to see kind of a lot of what goes into making it, like what's a priority and we'll pick this up later, right? Like what sort of bugs do they feel like? I mean, the game has bugs. It's in a great shape. I would not. It's coming out, and I think they pushed the date back. I think it's coming out in 2 months now. But if you do decide to do the early access on Steam thing, they are going to patch it once next month, and then after that, they're not patching it until final release, is what they said. But like, it's just neat to see. Sometimes these characters don't have voice dialogue yet. There's functions in here like I can bring up dialogue I've had with a character, and it will display on like a little tablet on the screen. And there's a play button, so I can replay the actual audio, but it doesn't work yet because it's not a priority for them right now, right? That's probably like, oh, we can do that real easy. We'll do that later, right? It's like it's not there yet. There are times where it seems like they had one character in mind, and then they decided to come up with another character. So you'll have these little codec messages. They're called Vox. In the universe, it's called a Vox message. And it does like a Metal Gear style codec face of the person you're talking to. But it has a different person speaking than the face that's there. Because they didn't create all those animations for that person yet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of times where I'll see a title card that just says placeholder on it, right? or like you'll see something where it's like, this scene is not yet final, and there's some obvious jank happening in the cutscene. And it's all like entertaining, to me anyway, to kind of see this stuff. It's neat to see how like the story parts get put together where they're literally skipping around. Like they're finishing these chapters and they're finishing these chapters, but because it's early access, they're changing aspects of them just to make them playable. Right? Like they're scaling the difficulty way down so you can still play these missions even though they're late game. There was a part where a character had a deck of cards that they were showing me and they were flipping over the cards, but they hadn't done the card art yet. So somebody just did like stick figures in Microsoft Paint with goofy little subtitles on them, all written in MS Paint. And I'm like, I love this. I freaking love this. Like, here's this super gritty, dark universe, and here's MS Paint art on these cards.
That real quick, that I had mentioned on the show that I did editing for my friend Kristen's new comic Hammer Song a few months ago, and I did that like at the end, right? Like I just kind of proofread it for her, but I said I really enjoyed it, so if she wanted like input earlier on in the process, like I'd be down for that. So she did give me like the rough script for the second issue, and so I got to like give her some notes and stuff. And one of them was she did like placeholder names in certain places, and I think at one point there was like a mage from the Order of, and it was something like no name yet, or it was something like that. But I was like, and I put a note, I was like, I know that you're going to come up with something cool, but I kind of like this to stay. Like it's just it's kind of a funny little joke, but also just it wasn't no name yet, but whatever it was, like almost jibed in a way where you could see it being in a fantasy world. Yeah, and I was like, that would be kind of brilliant, but you know, it was just a funny thing.
The part of the humor, though, is also the contrast. Like, the Warhammer 40k universe is very serious. It's very dark. It's very grim. You're constantly just surrounded by death and war and destruction and just weirdness, but in, like, not in a happy, fun weirdness, more in a, okay, boy, this is dark weirdness.
Right.
And then
that kind of breaks the fourth wall down in a certain developer's standpoint way.
It does, but because it's early access, you're like, oh, this is they're not going to put this in the final game. They're clearly acknowledging that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that in early access I'm able to see this, and it just contrasts so hard with everything else in the game, just crosses it right over into a hilarious territory. Like I really love it. And there's all sorts of little things in there. Like there's some Easter eggs that they're not really even Easter eggs. They're just sort of little jokes that they're in there. One character, it almost felt like they grabbed audio from the voice actress goofing around. Like she was delivering the line, but it does not work in the game at all. And they put it in there, and there's no subtitles for it. Like she just said it, and they only said it once. So I get the funny feeling that it's in there specifically as sort of a joke that they're going to pull out later, or maybe make an Easter egg.
Right.
I have to do something very specific to get it to play. And I was like, but I got to hear this, and it's amazing. Like, in universe, none of this works, but that's also why I keep going back to that comparison. So let me talk about the game itself, because that's kind of more what we're here for. But early access is a neat thing to see. It is a Diablo-style clone as far as the combat goes, except, boy, if you go running into this like you're playing a Diablo game, you're just going to get smeared all over the place.
So real quick, like because Diablo 3, as much as I love it, like it can be criticized for being hella easy. Mm-hmm. This is not that.
Hell no. So one of the cool things that it does is you can play it super easy if you want, but it's going to be way grindy. I'll explain all that in a second. So the way the game works is you are in this world. It has a very similar. It's similar in a lot of respects to that. You know, it's the same kind of bird's eye view at a kind of an angle. It's the same, like, you know, objects get transparent if you're in front of them. All of this stuff, except the one thing they do in this game, and thank you, is they let you rotate the camera around.
Oh, cool.
They finally do that. I've always hated that they don't do that in these games. But yes, if you hold the middle mouse button and move, it moves the camera. And thank you.
That's so what I loved
much
about the Champions of Norath games on PS2, that they allowed you to do that. And then when I played Diablo 3, I was like, this is weird. Why can't I change this?
This needs to be in every one of these games, guys, please.
In the future.
Yeah, because you need to change the angle to see what when you're looking up at an angle, you get more visibility than you do at any other angle. So whenever something's coming down from the top of the screen, you have more visibility on it. If it's coming up from behind you, it's going to sneak up on you, which I suppose is somewhat realistic, but I want to be able to swing that camera around.
What is this, Resident Evil?
No. It was. Some of the other ones feel like that, just in the locked camera way, but this game has a cover system, which you don't normally find in these style games, where you will walk up to cover, and you have to press spacebar, and you don't have to do this. You can stand out there and like sort of run back and forth and like try to kite enemies and things like that. You can also take cover. Your character and your opponents also have a system where they take stress. So you have your health to manage. You have your we'll call it magic to manage, but that's not really it. It's your class has a special sort of a fuel that they run on for their special abilities, but you also have sort of a meter that can go down. So if it's green, you're okay. If it's yellow, you're overwhelmed, and if it's red, you're just like your character is not okay. And it makes them move slower. It makes everything harder for you to do. You don't want that to go down as well. So you have to approach things in a much more tactical sense than you do in a lot of these other games. Also, the weapons you use matter significantly. Right now I'm running around with a plasma rifle, an energy sword, and a big shield, right? And there's guns that run on ammunition, and those do great damage against certain types of enemies. They don't really chew through walls, but I have a plasma weapon that if you're behind cover, I can make that cover disappear, like almost immediately. Different kinds of grenades, like a dozen or so different kinds of grenades. It is everything that was wrong with Borderlands is like not present here, and you almost get overload of just options. Instead of being locked in your character's abilities, your abilities are dependent by the weapons you use. And as I've already said, there's a ton of weapon options. Like there's 2 different kinds of shields. There's 6 or 7 different kinds of melee weapons. There's maybe a dozen different types of guns. You don't always have to use...
They all feel different.
Yeah. and they all have different abilities. So each one of those has 3 different abilities tacked onto it. So by swapping out your weapon, you swap out the abilities your character has. Right? Or, I'm sorry, there's 4.
I know.
Not 3, there's 4. For each one.
In comparison, like Borderlands doesn't it say they have like tens of thousands of weapons, but none of them feel different.
Right. They all feel like guns. Whereas every single one of these weapons that I've used so far really feels different. There's a difference when you're using a chain sword versus an energy sword. Significantly. And by the way, the chain sword is basically a giant chainsaw. which is pretty great.
Nice.
Great. It's tactical. It's you got to think about stuff. And I mentioned before that you can make the game sort of easier or harder as you like it, but the grind will be worse. And what I mean is, as you get different, your character gains levels, but that's not really where your growth comes from. Your growth comes mostly from your equipment, and your equipment has sort of a rating attached to it. And, there's a little running total on top of what your character's rating is based on your equipment. When you go to select a mission, there are, because it's not a progressive world like a Diablo game where you just kind of walk through the whole world. You are going on different missions all over these planets, and they're all sort of little bite-sized, 15-minute missions, each one of them will say.
Oh, okay.
So you go to a planet, and like this sector will have sort of this scale of difficulty, and you go there and you'll pull from like maybe 5 or 6 planets, and those 5 or 6 planets will each have 3 missions on them. So there's a lot of missions to choose from.
You saying that, I wonder if maybe very early on in the development, they were thinking of this as a free-to-play model.
I think maybe.
Because that structure sounds very, like I could see them saying like, oh, you need 15 energy to go do this mission that replenishes, or you can spend more money. But I'm glad they didn't go that route, but it just seems like that could have been what they were thinking of at a point.
There is a lot of the draw of a free-to-play game in here, but there's none of the hooks. Like, you buy the game, you get the game. They're selling a $50 game. So, and by that I mean, like, there's daily objectives, there's this, there's that, there's these bonuses for doing a certain amount of things within a week, like that kind of stuff. The kind of stuff you see in a free-to-play game, but it's all just kudos. Hey, if you can do this, we'll give you extra stuff. Knock yourself out.
Those things are fun. I mean, like Fortnite has the same kind of daily, weekly quests.
Like, I'm not even scratching the surface on all the different things you can do. It's like, there's a whole big pile of achievements you can get, and when you get these achievements, it unlocks different, like, here's a little extra skill tree for you, and you have hundreds of skill trees to choose from, too. Like, this thing just keeps unraveling in these spectacular ways where there's so many options. And it doesn't feel overwhelming either, because they have it categorized so well. It's like, well, I want to work on my ranged combat. So I go here, and here's 3 different skill trees that when I complete all of them, I get this one uber ability in the middle of them, right? And then, all right, now I want to work on my critical damage. So here's the critical damage tree, and I'll start working on that, right? So while you have all these options, it's real good about chopping them up so you can very quickly go to what you want to focus on. So back to the mission structure. I could really talk about this game all day. It does so much that's different from Diablo, but the main meat and potatoes of it is this mission structure where you're taking your equipment rating, you're looking at the rating of the mission. If the mission is rated as higher than your difficulty, you will have a harder time doing it, but you will get better loot. If it's rated at lower, your chance of getting better loot is less. And obviously, the bigger that disparity in both directions, the bigger the jump you're going to get. If you can somehow put together some crazy sick combo and take on yellow missions, while the missions that you are supposed to be within your range are supposed to be green, yellow are supposed to be, you are probably not going to do this, red is hell no. If you can take on a yellow mission, you're going to get great stuff out of that. If you can put together all these like synergies with your equipment.
Cool.
I could keep going. Better off just leave this here and have people research it, because I'm telling you, there's so much going on in this game, but it doesn't feel overwhelming, and I don't know how they did it. I don't feel overwhelmed with all the stuff I am looking at.
Seems like you like it.
I put another 30-something hours into this one as well.
That's a lot of gameplay in 2 weeks, like between those two. That's amazing.
I'm really enjoying it, so...
and looking at the footage that I did, like, and seeing the ability bar and stuff like that, it definitely, because... I just before I moved, I picked up Titan Quest, which came out for console. It's another action RPG that's like very well respected on PC, and I own it on Steam, but it's a PC game, so I'm not as inclined to sit down and play it that way.
Right.
But they released it on console, and I started playing it, and I was like, okay, now I see how difficult it is to port a game of that type to console because there's so much stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But judging from the ability bar on this Warhammer Inquisitor, right?
Martyr.
Yes.
You are an Inquisitor. The name of the ship you're investigating is called the Martyr.
Okay.
That's where that name comes from.
The ability bar is very much like Diablo 3, where I could see them easily mapping this to controller, and I'm sure that's by design. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I'm very interested in this, but I'm going to hold out and see if they do a console version. But it looks really good. Okay.
There is no I almost said easy access. There is no early access console version, but it's coming to Xbox and PlayStation.
Okay, cool. Very nice.
And I would be willing to bet money that it's going to be a good port because, again, looking at the control and looking at the way I mapped it myself, I can control everything with my mouse. Everything. Except for like some modifiers that I have to use with, you know, and I do have a mouse with extra programmable buttons, but it's no more than you could fit on a controller.
Cool.
So I think it's going to be good.
Yeah. How does it feel when you're hitting stuff? Because that's one of the things I love about Diablo 3 is that when you cleave through something, like it really feels like you're like just hacking away at stuff.
So a lot of the combat is ranged, right? But like, I would say it's hit or miss. Like I mentioned the chainsword and how cool that is. But like when you walk up to an enemy sometimes with this thing, you just sit there with your chainsword in them for forever waiting for their life to tick down. That doesn't work so well. On the other hand, there are times where I am swarmed by a bunch of like these enemies and I just use my shield nuke, which is basically he slams his shield into the ground and a big explosion rips out from him and everything just vaporizes and it feels amazing. So it's really hit or miss depending on the weapons you're using. I really don't get tired of making people disappear with a plasma rifle. I don't get tired of like having somebody hide behind a pillar and me taking that pillar out and watching them get crushed by it. Like there's I think maybe the melee combat is where it's the most hit or miss. No, that's not true either. It's just hit or miss, but mostly hit. Like I would say 80-20 hit versus miss.
And with it being more range focused anyway, like it's probably not as big a deal. And that also gives it like a much different flavor than Diablo. I mean, like, unless you play like all ranged on Diablo 3, but like for me, I'm mostly melee in that game.
And you can build a melee focused character very easily and have it work in this game. Like for the character I'm playing right now, I'll be real quick with this. There's 3 different types of armor you can use, and those 3 armors have a different special ability. The one I use a lot is the one where he's got basically these 2 giant shoulder-mounted rocket launchers, and when that thing is ready to go, you just see like this swarm of missiles go and hit whatever you're aiming at. The other one is he drops a turret, and a turret that auto-targets your enemies. And the other one is he basically jumps into the air super high and smashes into the ground in the middle of wherever you want him to land. Cool. Which kind of deals a bunch of damage to things around him, but also puts him in the middle of combat. If you're playing a melee character, you would want that for sure. Because, there's a boss, I'm going to punch him in the face and then just wail on him until he's done. Like that's how you would do that. I don't roll with that armor because I'm mostly range focused, but I could definitely see if I was, instead of focusing on the range skill tree, focusing on the melee skill tree, going with the armor that just gets me in there so I can smash things.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense.
I would also tend to be more range focused in a computer game because you got the mouse and stuff. And I was just realizing that a lot of the times, even though I did melee like as a monk in Diablo 3, I don't feel like I'm hitting it the same way as with the controller because I get better vibration with like the PlayStation 4 DualShock. Yep. And maybe that's a problem with modern day mice.
You don't want a mouse that has that like sort of haptic feedback going on. You don't want a mouse that shakes when you're trying to aim on something. It works in a controller, and I'm not really sure why it does, but I certainly because the mouse has the little optic camera in it, and if it starts to shake, your cursor's going to go nyeh. So you don't want that.
Yeah, so like I guess we could put diodes on our faces or something like that and shock ourselves when we do bad. But
yeah, but I mean, if you're really, since it's coming to all these different platforms, the one thing I don't know, and I know they have issues with this, is I don't think, like maybe Xbox and PC will play together, but I don't see PlayStation playing with anyone.
Right.
Kind of
They
unfortunate.
never do.
Because games like this, I feel like, would somebody with a mouse cursor have an advantage? Probably, but it's not like the advantage you get in a first-person shooter.
Right.
Because they've gotten so good about making these games accessible to controllers. I don't feel like the person at a controller is at a significant disadvantage. I do feel like they're at a disadvantage, but not one. And if you're playing co-op, who cares?
Yeah. Exactly.
There is a PvP, but there's a lot. I see most people playing co-op, really.
So maybe you could enable it in one mode even, because it seems like they have a good back-end architecture where they can port it from system to system, so you should also be able to switch on and off like certain features in one mode to another.
One more thing. This is one of my favorite things about this game. The enemies never drop equipment you can't use. Never.
Ooh.
Never.
Nice.
I have never gotten a single piece of equipment for another character class. And they do have different armor for the other character classes, and I assume different weapons as well.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's important for randomized drops, because if you never get anything that you like, even after you play it for a while, then it's just going to discourage you to never play it
But
again.
there's no lack of variety. I feel like sometimes the other loot games use that in a way like, oh, you got this really awesome thing, put it in your chest so your other character can use it, right? This is just like, nah, man, we got so much awesome stuff, we don't have to play that game. You just get awesome stuff for the character you have. Really enjoyed it.
I see that. That was a lot.
Sorry.
No, it's good. I'm actually really excited about that game now. And it was not. I had no idea about it until the last episode when you brought it up. So
Yeah.
Right, me neither.
Watch some videos, guys. It's real good. Even if you're not a 40K fan, it's just a good game.
Speaking of diodes on your face, Patrick, do I take that to mean that you watched Ready Player One?
No, I didn't.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I thought you would have been like day one on that.
Just Patrick being crazy. I was actually recently thinking about the Nintendo peripheral that was canceled back in the Wii days. It was like the Vitality sensor or something like that, and how it was probably a good thing because there were probably people that were going to die if like they started to sync up like our heartbeats with the actual game. But like then again, I was like also just realizing that they don't really have that for computer yet. Like I mean, I'm sure it'll happen better with AR and stuff like that, but it's just not the same with console. And that's the one way that you can, like we always talk about feel, but me and you, Julian, we've been more console driven, especially recently. Like I had my days where I did some shooters and stuff, and I realized that's what I like to do a lot on PC. I would play shooters and like tap from the distance, but those like FPS games and stuff are the only time that I would like not really want vibration as much, I guess, so because it's like Angelo said, more precise. But the other time, like for a Diablo kind of style game, it's pretty cool just to like feel like you're pinching a character or something with the mouse and bringing it like a chess piece or like a little action figure. And Warhammer 40K even comes from those kind of action figure style games where I feel like a mouse is like a perfect mechanism to hold your character and move them.
Well, yeah, but you're not doing that in this one. And also, maybe be careful with saying action figures. They're minis. People will kill you.
Okay. My bad. I don't have the terminology.
I'm being a little silly. It's a miniatures game, but yeah, it's not it's a Diablo like click to move type thing. Mm-hmm. So you're not really doing that pick up move type.
Well,
of
and that's kind of the reason why I prefer playing Diablo 3 on console than PC is because a lot of times on PC I'd be clicking to attack, but my character would move instead.
Yeah,
and vice versa. Where on like Xbox, I'm just like, no, I'm moving right here, and then I'm punching this thing in the face or whatever, and it just feels a lot better to me.
Yeah, that's a problem they haven't seemed to solve. I mean, I guess the on-book solution is you hold shift to keep your character from moving. Like that's the on paper solution to that. But and I believe they all do that, where if you hold shift, your character will just stand still and fire in the direction you click. But it's not ideal, and I totally get that, and I've had that problem too with all of these games.
Yeah,
because there's really that's an interface thing, and I don't know how you solve that problem. But I've had the same thing happen where I want my character to move, like I'm getting surrounded, and I'm clicking somewhere, but there's an enemy there, so instead of moving in that direction, he starts shooting, and I'm like, no, I want you to run, actually.
Right.
Yeah, that happens a lot micromanaging in StarCraft too. But there's just kind of no way around it at this level until we like get controllers that can think with us.
Yeah. And then you have to like just start quaffing heal potions. Like, oh man, you can customize your potions in this game. I gotta stop. It's so good.
I mean, like, I don't have that much new stuff myself. I just kind of continued the plot line with a new like year to Hearthstone, and there's like a new expansion that came out. So everybody's been really into that in the last week or two. There's like a lot of crazy new mechanics. Some of them are like memeable. There's this one thing called the Shutter Walk now, which is a 9-drop that replays all the battle cries as a shaman that have happened the rest of the game. So you can even do this thing and like as a shaman to do the next battle cry twice. And like these battle cries can like copy the thing and then also take all of your cards except for that card back into your hand, so you can like copy the card, get the card back, and then replay it again for one, so you can do the entire thing twice. And it like takes all the battle cries about like a minute to go off, and the other I've actually gotten another player to leave while it's happening. It's not even over yet. It's so cheesy. Maybe that's what the guy meant by cheap.
Right. You know, it's a dumb thing, and I'm probably like in the minority on this because I love Hearthstone, but it didn't hook me quite like it probably could have. If like when you dropped your card, that the monster or the character actually popped up out of the card, and then when they attack, it would do like a Fire Emblem style animation thing. And I know that would like. Okay, so one, like that would make the game more resource intensive for like a computer or a smartphone or whatever. Right. And two, it would also make the game slower because you'd have to load those animations. But if I had the option to turn that on, I would be like so much more into that game because I'm a very visual person.
You want like Hearthstone Eye of Judgment, basically.
Yeah.
That was a cool idea. I wish that worked. Oh well.
There's like rare cards that are golden versions, and they have like a little bit of like a Harry Potter-esque, like it's moving back and forth to it, but like they only talk when you throw it down. They'll like make their own like entrance, like audio. They don't have like their own animations, but if like there's like a different sound and like feel to a card if it's like between 1 and 3 attack versus like 4 and 6, and then like a really hard like if it's like 8 or more attack that you can hit. Beyond that, it's like not really customized.
That is fun. I love how you hear the crowd go ooh when it's a real big hit too. It's fun.
Yeah.
My favorite card and my most powerful one before I stopped playing was this like Tyrannosaurus type monster that was like a level like an 8 or 9 gem one, but when you would play it, you would hear it like trumping before it would appear. Nice. It would be like prompt, 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 and then you would slam it on the thing, and then I think it did some sort of like neat little like rattle or something when it would attack. Like it felt more weighty than your regular cards. But I was like, no, let's take that like 10 steps further.
Right. And that's where it'll go someday, but for now it's got to work on so many different systems, you know.
Yeah. Maybe Hearthstone VR. Ooh.
Yeah. I kind of like the subtlety of the animation in that. And they do have a weird way of making things have like a weight to them or a scale, despite the fact that they all are essentially tokens or cards.
Yeah.
But like
I really like the randomization of some battle cries or like cards that are like generated. Like if you play an elemental one turn, the next turn you can play a card that'll discover another element and it'll kind of like go and come underneath the card back into your like the rest of your hand as if you're like pulling from an imaginary deck or something. Like it's it has these little reasons I come back to it over and over. It's kind of just like it's the beauty and the simplicity of it, and just knowing like what's going to happen, but also having like slight variations from hand to hand, kind of like baseball in a way where it's really boring and not at the same time. And like even though you think you've seen everything, something new will happen with like the card options that you got, even though it's just 30, and I wish it were 45 sometimes. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the number of cards in your deck.
Yeah.
It's a solid game. Like I stopped playing it, and I'm probably not going to go back only because I'm just sort of done with the whole CCG thing. But
Right.
I was into that game for a good couple of months, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I can fall off.
Yeah.
But
We've talked about it so many times, but man, I love Blizzard's designs.
Yep.
They're all like
that's
they're so.
why I
they're-
keep coming back.
Yeah, they're so. I mean, one, they're so cohesive across so many different types of video games, but still very recognizable as this is a Blizzard game. But also, they're so clean and crisp. I mean, have you guys seen Blizzard World in Overwatch?
No.
The new map that came out recently.
No.
It's a theme park to Blizzard, and it is amazing.
Oh, yeah, a little bit. I've walked it, but you know how I can't have that game on my system.
You don't want to get the monkey back on your back.
I gotta see
Yeah,
that. That
that's-
sounds fun.
It's really cool. Like I remember I watched the trailer, was like the fly through of the world, but like it references everything. I mean, they've got Blackthorn in there. They've got Rock and Roll Racing in there. They've got,
Nice.
you know, Lost Vikings, and I think Nova, right? StarCraft Ghost. That's her name, right?
Yeah. There's even Nova missions now in StarCraft 2 that you can buy.
Cool. Yeah. She's in there. She's represented, even though,
Neat.
you know, that game never came out. Like
Right.
it's amazing. It's
Right.
really cool.
Yeah, they brought that back a little bit recently, but they always have this synergy between product, among all the products, I should say.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. And we talked about that recently too, about like, you know, getting, or when we were talking about EA, you know, as far as like the way Blizzard will like reward you for across games, like, you know, if you buy like a WoW like the collector's edition of WoW for any expansion, you're going to get a plethora of goodies for every other Blizzard game, which is really nice.
Here's something for Diablo, and here's something for, you know, yeah.
Yeah. There's always 3 packs of Hearthstone cards, and there's, you know, now there's probably Heroes of the Storm stuff, and, you know, probably, I mean, cause I don't think there's been an expansion since Overwatch came out. So this next expansion, I'm sure will have Overwatch skins in it.
They always keep you on your toes, though. Like, they started a process in Hearthstone where every 2 years the expansion packs get looped out, and the standard packs will always stay there. And you can get one a week free from, like, winning in brawls and stuff. But, like, I've been keeping up with the recent expansions, and it's good because, like, before that I fell off a little bit, and the expansions before where I fell off a little bit are all not in standard mode anymore.
Right.
So now I have become powerful. And,
Yeah.
like, thank God, because there's too much to collect, and you have to start at the right point.
Right.
Otherwise, you're so far behind. Like, I just can't get to the top, even like doing 5-10 matches a day almost. It's just there's these people that do like all day, every day, and have since the beginning, and I can't stay on it that much. But it is great to have like a collection that grows from year to year, and you have it all there, and you can look at it, and you make your own decks and stuff. And I like to think about them on my own, and not really like just be a script kiddie almost, and take like a deck that already exists online. But there's those people too. They're just like, I took this one, I got all the way to the top. And that's me maybe 1 month or something like that when you find an exploit. But I really like finding your own deck and crafting something that makes you feel like a magician, and kind of just like throwing out all these minions and spells that work like together in a sort of,
and that's supposed to
like,
be
way all your
that's
own.
supposed to be the fun of the game, right? And back when I was playing CCGs, that was the fun of the game. And I'm not trying to be like the old man going, you kids, you ruined everything. But like back when I played Magic,
But you
net
did,
building
kids.
wasn't a thing. But you did not go to websites to build your deck, and everybody wasn't fighting over the same cards. Everybody was trying different things, and it was real fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was hanging out with people in my dorm, and we just had these piles of cards, and nobody was concerned about having, you have to make sure you have 4 of every card in your deck, or it's just not going to, because you want to make sure that card
Not
comes up.
optimized.
Like, we were just playing to have fun.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like people do that anymore, which is kind of a shame.
Because now there's the meta.
I know.
And, and that's the thing. Like, I didn't mean to talk about today, but like Marvel Strike Force just did their first big update, like going into Infinity War, where they added a bunch of new characters and everything, which is good because very rapidly like I noticed, a thing where you basically had like this same, like everybody's using the same team. It's Captain America, Crossbones, Yondu, Spider-Man, and then either Daredevil or like the fifth one is variable, but it's almost always Daredevil or some other damage dealer. Because what you do is you have Captain America, keep Crossbones healthy by taunting long enough for Crossbones to do his big, like, self-destruct move, which takes out, I mean, it does, like, massive damage to the entire party. But it's like everybody has this. And it's like, I'm tired of fighting this combo. Like, I'm like, okay, so I'm gonna have everybody focus on Crossbones. And then when he's dead, I take out Yondu because he's a problem, like, by turn 4. So I need to work on him and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so now with new characters coming in and some balance changes too, hopefully it changes the meta. So it makes it interesting or more interesting to play against other people. Cause it's like, every team is the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's good they get rid of some cards, though, in this, too. They try to change the meta, since that is a problem. They know it, and they do pretty well to nerf certain cards pretty quickly, like that Shutterwalk combo that I was telling you about has to go at some point, which is why I craft it very quickly.
I remember they nerfed Leroy Jenkins. That was way back when I was playing that. I remember they did that, and I was like, crap, I just got that card.
Leroy Jenkins!
There was some sort of combo people were doing with him that was kind of crazy, but... yeah, and also that whole, like, the moving window of what cards are valid kind of helps control power creep too. One of the problems they had with early Magic was power creep, which was they had to keep making stronger cards, otherwise people wouldn't buy them. But then the game itself starts to kind of crack and splinter because now the cards are getting stronger than the game was ever meant to be able to handle. So then they had to start banning things, and it got real crazy. And then finally, they came up with this whole idea of the windows. So like there were like 3 series are always active, and then once it gets past those 3, one drops off and another one comes on. So it's just,
interesting.
Yeah, it helps manage that, right? And so, oh man, this particular series was really strong. Well, it'll be gone in 3 months, so just keep things there and try to rein it in a little bit. That kind of deal.
Speaking of series that are really strong but are now gone, I just, as of yesterday, finished reading Invincible because it ended. The final trade came out, I guess this week or maybe last week.
No spoilers.
No spoilers, but damn, guys. Like, I know I've talked about a lot on the show before, and nothing is perfect, but Invincible is as close to a perfect superhero comic as you can get. Now having read every issue, like, because none of it, there's not a bad story arc. There aren't characters that are like, oh, I hate this person. Like, there's none of that. Like, it's just a fantastic superhero book from issue 1 to issue 144. And usually when superhero books end, they don't have an ending. They just get canceled. So for this to have an actual planned end and it be as satisfying as it was, like, I got a little misty-eyed at some point because I was like, oh, this is far better than I ever thought it could have been. Like, I had no idea how he was, like, Kirkman is going to, like, land the plane on Invincible. And I was also angry about it because I'm like, dude, you've still got Walking Dead going on, like, forever. And that, to me, the steam on that ended, like, a long time ago where it's like, okay, this is just kind of the same thing over and over. You find a place, you stay there for a while, shit goes bad, you move on, and you find another place. Where Invincible was always going to new places and introducing new characters, and the universe is very, very robust, and the characters.
And then shit went wrong, and then they had to find a new place.
And then, and then they moved on, and but it's just really great, guys. And so now that it's done, like, I will once again say, look, they're doing a movie. Get in on the ground floor so you can be that person that was like, well, I was reading it before the movie came out. Because you're going to want to be that person. Like, Invincible is on a different level as far as superhero books go. And I highly recommend it to anybody who's interested in comics even a little bit.
Well, you also hinted at like the Ready Player One movie. Did you see that?
I did.
That's something that other people should go to, especially if we, like me, have read it and been there from the ground floor. Now, I don't know if I screwed myself over, and so I just don't want to know.
Well, so I can't comment to the reading part of it because I didn't read the book. I know my lovely girlfriend Jenny had read the book, and she was surprised at how different the movie was. But she also wasn't disappointed in the movie. But she wasn't as high on the movie as I was. Because I went into that movie thinking it was going to be garbage. Cause like the trailer, I was like, oh my goodness, this is just going to be reference the movie. Like, and I felt like it was going to be like, and there are parts that are very cringy for me where it's like, we've got to show how much we know about this old stuff. And it's like, guys, just dial it back. But there's not as much of that as I was expecting. It's a honest to goodness, like really fun movie, and some of those references are very good. Like, there's something about seeing the DeLorean running around again, for people of a certain age where it's like, oh wow, that's really cool. Little things like that. The plot is really good, and it's Spielberg. It feels like a Spielberg movie, so it's got that kind of energy to it, right? So I highly recommend it. It's just, seems to depart from the book in a lot of ways that, your mileage may vary on how you feel about it. I know I was flipping through my girlfriend's copy of it, and there's like a part where I think they go into a movie, and the movie is completely different in the theatrical version of Ready Player One, but that also made it like very surprising. And it was also for her being a specific fan of this movie. She was like, oh, and it was like a really big moment. So that was really cool. My only thing is that like, there's two things. The actor who plays the Willy Wonka type character is bad. Like I know the character is supposed to be kind of like a shy nerd and kind of like maybe a little bit on the autism spectrum, but the actor himself just seems bored as hell to be there like all the time. And his delivery to me just felt very flat, but he's not in the movie that much. The other thing is that considering that like the person that they all idolize are like, well, more me and Angelo's age, actually a little bit older, a few years older than us. And so he's obsessed with stuff from the 80s and stuff like that. It's more 90s stuff that's shown in the movie.
Right.
That's a whole movie thing only.
Yeah. And I'm sure it has to do with licensing. Cause for me, I'm like, really? Like, you're not going to have a Transformer and a G.I. Joe in here, like at all. Like He-Man's in it, which is cool. But it's like, you think 80s, you think Transformers and G.I. Joe, right? Like,
yeah. And you also think more 8-bit than 16-bit for what that's worth. Like, I know...
Yeah.
I like Mario Kart, right? Mario Kart was a 90s thing.
Yeah.
Not an 80s thing.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, too, is that some of the games, and again, I'm sure it's purely a licensing thing, but it's like, this movie takes place in 2045. I don't think that Borderlands is still going to be a big thing that people are talking about in 2045. Overwatch, maybe? World of Warcraft more than Overwatch. Yeah. But it's just kind of funny. Like, they have Minecraft World. I'm like, okay, I can see Minecraft still being around in 2045.
Sure.
I can't see Borderlands being around in 2045.
Borderlands feels more pop than it does. Yes. Like it has staying power.
Yeah.
And I feel so bad about Borderlands. I really wanted that game to be good.
They could nail it with number 3,
They could. Who knows?
It's more like Mad Max.
Right. I think, well, I don't want to get back into Borderlands. But I've had a lot of people at work saw it, obviously, because why wouldn't they? And I was surprised by how much they weren't into it.
Really?
Yeah, and I kind of get the general vibe, but of course the internet is mostly negative, that people out there weren't big fans of it. But like, I talked to a friend of mine at work who I really trust her opinion on a lot of this stuff. We're literally like a month apart from when we were born. So a lot of similar experiences growing up, that sort of thing. And she said like the 80s, like a lot of the, how do I want to explain this? When the references come in, they feel forced. They don't feel like a cool wink and a nod thing. It feels more like oh man, look at all the 80s. Look at all this 80s. We love the 80s,
It depends. Excuse me. It depends. And that's why I was saying that some of it is very cringy.
Yeah.
Like, there's a part where, like, I think 3 different people talk about this one thing from an Atari 2600 game, and they say it as if they're reading it off of Wikipedia. And there's a lot of parts where characters are just trying to like out trivia each other, and that stuff is terrible. But there's other things that are very subtle. So like the main character part, like when he's in the game, the character Parzival, his avatar has Han Solo's weapon belt, like his gun belt, right? But the buckle is the Eye of Thundara from Thundercats. And I'm like, okay, that's really neat. They don't mention either Han Solo or Thundercats. It's just like, if you're paying attention, it's like, oh, that's neat. Or like, one of his friends has like this workshop, and like this one spot where he's sitting is littered with 80s references, but it's like one part is like a Nintendo Power is like strewn out on the floor. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool. So it varies. And I will say the cringy parts of it with the references are very cringy, where you're just like roll your eyes and like, you know, and like do like a little finger gun at your head.
Yeah, those are the ones that were in the commercials too.
Right. But when they're more subtle, like it's really good. But then again, weird stuff like nobody in 2045 is going to be using the Battletoads as their avatar. And nobody in 2045 is going to use the Michael Bay Ninja Turtles as their avatar.
Oh my goodness, no. And that was another thing she said. And she's like, you know, they have a very limited scope of what the 80s was. It was like some very, very specific things that everybody is into in this universe. And they're missing. It's like, this is 20% of the 80s, whereas the other 80%. And it's like they keep reusing the same 20%, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. But you know, maybe this is just an aspect of us being at this age now, because think back to when you were 10, right? And think about stuff from like the 50s and the 60s that was used, like music and stuff like that. It's a very small slice of that era, but that's what everybody goes to.
Right.
No, you know, and my mom would complain about that. She was like, I like the oldie station, but they only play the same songs from everybody all the time. They never branch out. And it's because that's all anybody knows anymore. Not, you know, for the people who didn't grow up in it, that's all that we take from it.
Yeah.
So it might just be an aspect of that.
Their own fault.
Yeah. We're just at that age now where, you know.
Sucks getting old.
I don't feel old. It doesn't bother me.
That was more of a tongue-in-cheek thing.
Yeah. Well, before we move on, I do have one story to tell, real quick about my, Nightwish concert, which was, 2 nights ago as we're recording this. It's their Decades tour because they're celebrating 2 decades as a band, which is a pretty big feat for a Finnish metal group, because as I can tell, they're pretty volatile, where they break up and then reunite as different bands and reform. And I mean, Nightwish itself has gone through 3 lead singers already. But I was all on board, right? Drove down to Dallas and I had my ticket. I bought it months ago. Yes, Nightwish, let's go. And I was so close to the stage. I was like right there. And the thing is that like the last 2 times that I've seen Nightwish, me not being used to seeing rock concerts, I wasn't like eventually all of the rock was too much for me and I had to leave early. And I was like, no, I got earplugs this time. I am here for the whole show. I'm going to hear every song. About 20 minutes into the concert, and keep in mind, like, while I was waiting for the band to start, like, I was like sweating profusely. Like I was like, oh, it's just cause like there's a lot of people here. It's really hot. But about 20 minutes into the concert, I was like, I should get some water. So I went over to the bar, ordered water, you know, paid him. He gave me the bottle. As soon as he gave me the bottle, the world went away. Like just everything faded out. I remember slumping down to the ground. And then like the next thing I remember is the bartender coming around to the front to like give me my change and kind of like check on me. And then I remember somebody helping me up from the ground because I was on the ground and I felt like I had been asleep for a while and I had been dreaming. And then I remember somebody helping me up to like a seated position. And the next thing I remember is being dragged into a wheelchair and then taken to the back. I passed out. And it was super scary. Cause you know, that's not normal. You know, and I'm thinking, I'm freaking out, right? Cause I'm like, whoa, what is this like? Is it like a low blood sugar thing? Cause I'm diabetic? Cause I hadn't eaten in over 6 hours by this point, but my sugar was high when they checked it. Although my doctor said that was probably from the event, like it just like spiked it. But my blood pressure was low, but not dangerously low. So I'm like, do I have cancer? Like, is this like a heart attack? Like, what's going on?
Right.
You know, like I'm freaking out. But as I was sitting there and they were checking on me, I felt all right. I felt better. You know, I drank my water. They checked on me and I was like, all right, I think I'm okay, but you know, obviously not to stay at the concert. So, the EMT was like, I think you need to eat something and like take it easy and just like drink some water slowly. And I think you'll be okay. So, you know, left the concert after only hearing like 3 songs and grabbed a t-shirt on the way out, and then went to a Waffle House and got some dinner and sat there for a while. And I was good to go. Like I felt better and I drove home and I was fine. Went to the doctor the next day. He checked me out. He basically thinks it was like a combination of things that just led to this bad event. Like that I hadn't had enough to drink that day, hadn't had enough to eat, standing in a crowd for a long period of time. Just all of these things kind of combined to, you know, me having this thing happen. He doesn't seem too worried about it being the sign of like a worse medical condition. Thank goodness. But I say this as like kind of a PSA to everybody. Cause at first I was like, I mean, I shouldn't even talk about this on the show. Cause I don't want to be one of those people who's like, gets on social media is like, oh, well, I passed out at a concert today. You know, like I'm kind of like nobody needs to know about it. But at the same time, it's like, hey, everybody, like stay fed and hydrated, especially, you know, if you're going to be doing something where you're like alone in a big group of people in another city. And I'm just thankful that I thought to go get the water, because I would have been mortified if I had passed out where I was standing, because there's no way that show would have kept going, where I was. Like, it would have been very noticeable. Like, everybody around me would have freaked out. The band probably would have stopped for a bit, and I would have just felt awful for like stopping the show even for a minute for everybody. So I'm glad, you know, I'm thankful for that I've had the presence of mind to go do that. But yeah, take care of yourselves, everybody. You don't want to have to leave a concert you've been waiting for 2 years, early because you didn't take care of yourself.
Well, sometimes, especially at the front of like hard rock or metal concerts or even punk, I haven't been able to breathe either, just because so many people are close. Or I'll get into like a mosh pit and stuff like that, and just get hit a lot. But I think even if you're not doing a lot of drugs or something like that, you could just get dehydrated from the general body heat. Yeah,
and that's what I was thinking it was, but now that I think back to it, I was sweating way more than I should have for that particular setting. So I think this event was going on for like pretty much from the moment that I got to the venue. It was just building. I've been to Nightwish before. Like the Nightwish fan base is pretty mellow. So they don't mosh or anything like that. And it's not like I was like, could not move in this group of people. Like, there was definitely plenty of space around me and stuff like that. So I felt confident being that close to the stage. But again, like, glad that I didn't pass out where I was standing. Cause again, I was like, you know, maybe 3 rows worth of people back from the stage. So, you know, I wouldn't have wanted Marco Hitalia to see me like go down, because dude's awesome. That's the end. I did get a free CD out of it, so that was awesome. Nice. They had released their new compilation album, which actually goes chronologically backwards in time. It's 2 discs. And so the first track of the first disc is that song I talked about at the beginning of the show, Greatest Show on Earth. And then it goes all the way back in time until the final track is their demo from 1996. Nice. So that's pretty neat. I'm really looking forward to listening to that. And came with my ticket, so at least I got that out of it. And I got like my face rocked off for 20 minutes because they are amazing.
I think they would appreciate that story.
Maybe, yeah. And I think our listeners will appreciate this next segment that we like to call Pack Watch. This week, again, like, I guess ask and the Mega Buster of Destiny shall provide, because it definitely seems to be some sort of oracle or something, always giving us the game that we need right when we need it. Because this week on Pack Watch, we're covering God of War for the PlayStation 2, the original game in the series that is getting a brand new sequel. Well, as you're listening to this, it's already out. It's coming out the day after for us recording this.
But really, like, in an hour.
Yeah, that's actually true. Like, if I had, bought it digitally, like, I'd be able to, like, play it soon, but I actually bought it
like,
physically.
it's gonna happen while we're on.
Yeah. God of War was developed by Sony Santa Monica Studio and published by Sony Computer Entertainment, and was released March 22nd of 2005. Directed by David Jaffe and produced by Shannon Studstill. It has a Metascore of 94, which is almost as high as Metal Gear Solid 2, which we covered last episode. I'm really curious about this discussion. I know how Patrick feels about God of War. I know Angelo's less stoked on it. So,
Okay.
So here's the weird thing about this for me, like now looking at, like when I was looking up the release date and everything, I don't know why I didn't buy this game on launch day, because, I mean, this came out the year the Xbox 360 came out, but I didn't buy my Xbox 360 until the following year, and God of War was like the big PlayStation 2 game. The only thing that I can think of is that this is about the time that I lost, or the Game Fellas closed, and I was working like 2 jobs, like really long hours and stuff, so maybe I just didn't have time to get to it. But it's really strange for me to not buy like the big game that year. And it's not like I hadn't played the demo. Like the demo for God of War where you fight the Hydra boss battle is like one of the best demos I've ever played. So I knew what this game was going to be. I knew I was excited for it. I don't know why I didn't buy it. I bought it from friend of the show, John Golson, I think in like later on, like after I had bought my 360. And I picked it up, and I was very glad that I did. Like, it blew me away, especially given the fact that I'd already started playing 7th generation games on my Xbox. But I was still like, wow, God of War is amazing. And I don't know why I slept on it for as long as I did.
Yeah, that game is spectacle. It is spectacle, like almost to a fault, right? Everything in that game is big, and it's bombastic, and it's in your face, and it is fun. You know, I'm not going to say I do not hate God of War. Okay.
Me neither.
It is a fun sort of action movie type summer blockbuster video game, but it also kind of has the same flaws as one of those. Like, it's not going to be, people aren't going to look at it in 20 years and go, man, that is one of the finest pieces of video game, whatever. I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to talk about, you know, how mind-blowing it was to like fight that Hydra, or, you know, how edgy some of the stuff was. I don't know.
They might remake it in, like, you know, virtual reality with the same kind
and
of
they might
feel to it or storyline, but now you're actually doing it.
And I'm not also going to say that it's like, I don't know, it's not like a Michael Bay Transformers movie or whatever. It's not. It kind of is, but I think it's got a little more class than that for what that's worth.
Yeah.
Well,
class.
That's not the right word either. It's got it's substance. How about substance?
Yeah,
it's got more substance
and depth. Yes,
because it's rooted
definitely at the time too.
Yeah,
it's rooted in good source material, and it's very good about representing that, but putting that good twist on it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it has very interesting representations of the source material it comes from, and I will give it that. So it's not a mindless game.
The great thing about pulling from Greek mythology and mythology in general is that, like, every oracle or oral traditionalist would, like, tell their own version of those kind of stories in order to, like, get to the people they're telling those stories to. And I think that they did that here, definitely. And David Jaffe even said that, like, he wanted to do the same thing that they did with Onimusha, where they kind of take other mythologies and make their own spin on it in order to create a better game. And I definitely believe that. I felt that way with the first 2 games for sure. And then it just kind of got to be a little bit too difficult on its own good, but for its own good. But, like, you know, overall, this is like David Jaffe at his best. And it's also like the way mythological stories were meant to be told in a way.
Mm-hmm. I don't think it's. I think there's stuff. I think there's parts of what you're talking about in there for sure. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think it has... is staying power the right word? I don't know. See, I don't want to be too down on it, right? Because I think the game has its place. I think it deserves to be talked about. I think it deserves to be recognized. But I don't see myself ever going back to it. And I don't see why people feel the need to go back to it, right?
Well, there's no replayability, really. It's like mainly plot-based.
But not even from a perspective of, like, there are games, it's like, oh, one and done. I played through this game. I saw the entire story. Then I look at my shelf and go, I could play that again. I don't feel like that way about God of War.
That's so interesting to me, because I do feel that this is going to be a game that the people are talking about like 20 years later, because I feel that, so it was almost like a divergence when it came out, and it's sort of what I was getting back to when I was talking about Yakuza 0, where I think Japanese action games, one of their hallmarks is a very rigid animation system and combat system where you have to commit to every move that your character does. And, you know, if you committed when the enemy was a fraction off to the left, well, then you just whiffed everything. Where God of War, I think, popularized a very different style of action game that I think is more of a Western design where everything can be canceled. Like, you can halt a combo anytime and block or parry or shift your move. Like, if you're attacking this group of enemies over to your left, you can immediately, in the same combo string, move to the enemies behind you and start attacking them instead. And I prefer that. I think it's more fluid and it makes more sense to me. But I guess it also makes the game a little bit easier, quote unquote. You know, like, I can see, like, you know, your hardcore, like, Devil May Cry 3 players, you know, being like, God of War, you know, it's just like a baby game. Cause I've heard, it's kind of funny. We'll get into it when we get into comments, but one thing that I've noticed, especially with the new God of War coming out, is how quick people are to throw the original God of War under the bus. Like, you know, it wasn't that good of a game. Like, the character sucks, and, like, it's got these problematic things, and the combat, like, you just have to press square over and over again to beat the game, and it's like, no.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far.
Combo system is pretty deep in God of War. It's very, very
Press
satisfying.
triangle sometimes.
Yes.
I mean, and square and circle to, like, pop enemies up and grab and, there's all sorts of stuff.
I wouldn't go that far. I would just say that, like, I don't know. Something about it feels, there's parts of it that feel well thought out. There's parts of it that feel very clever. There's also parts of it that feel shallow to me, you know? And I'm not, and see, I hate saying that because then that also sounds like I'm saying something very condescending, and I don't even want to be like that way. I want to be more neutral. Like, some of it just doesn't feel as substantial. I think I already said that.
I think maybe that's by design, because going off of, like, the same quote that Patrick had started, one of the things that David Jaffe said about the game was that he wanted to merge it with, like, Clash of the Titans and heavy metal, because he said he liked the kiddie stuff of Clash of the Titans, the way that they told the Greek mythology stuff and made it, like, accessible to everybody, but he wanted it to have, like, the edge of, you know, adult themes like sex and violence. And, you know, now we don't think of that as, like, a very adult theme. We actually think of it more like maybe a little more not childish,
juvenile,
but, like, a little more juvenile. But in 2005, like, it's like, oh wow, like, this game is really edgy. You know, it's pushing these boundaries and stuff like that. And it's like, you got, like, all
they
this.
had a sex minigame for the first time.
Yeah, you had like boobs, and you had, like, the sex minigame, and you had, like, oh, you're really taking it to that Cyclops. Like, that's brutal, you know, and there's a place for that. Like, I mean, I still like that stuff.
But I mean, it feels like an adolescent game, if that makes sense. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It feels like a game that believes it's an adult, and a lot of people who are consuming it believe it. No, I keep doing this where I say stuff that sounds mean, and I'm really not trying to do that. Let me try this again.
It just was more of an innocent time when they didn't have stuff, like, past it yet.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's more, it has a coming of age feel to it, right? Like, we're getting from point A to point B, and here's somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah, I mean, the whole game is a coming of age story where, you know, like, Kratos becomes the next god of war. So it's funny that it feels that way in general, because, you know, he has to go, like, as a soldier who was tricked by the god of war in order to fight because he was the best one on the battlefield with him. Like, he has to fight his way back in order to just get, like, to a final battle with Ares. And a lot of people thought that was, like, a letdown. And I thought so, too. It was, like, maybe too easy, but, like, it had a great grand scale for the first time at the same time. And so it's funny that you would point that out. Just, I feel like it's interesting that it has, like, a sort of meta context in terms of its plot.
I think it is adolescent. I don't think juvenile is the right word. I think adolescent might be the right word, because it has the kind of struggles that people go through when they're an adolescent, right? And in a way, it kind of almost perfectly represents them. Like, you struggle with really trying to have this cool adult persona, and maybe you overcompensate, right?
Yeah. And there's also, and I was just thinking about this as you guys were talking, there might be something of it just from David Jaffe's influence. Because if you look at David Jaffe's, like, catalog, you know, you've got like Twisted Metal, you've got Twisted Metal Black, you've got, that, what, Drawn to Death or whatever, like
that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. So it's like he might just be very into the whole metal teenage rebellion type thing, but where, you know, I think once you get to like God of War 2, where Cory Barlog takes over, it's a much more mature game that still has those elements that made God of War popular. But I think, Angela, you'd mentioned like never wanting to go back to it. I have gone back to God of War 1 and 2 with the HD collections and found them both eminently replayable, but God of War 2 is such a amazing sequel that it kind of makes God of War pale in comparison on all aspects. And I think a lot of times, like, when people are talking about God of War, they kind of start to inevitably drift into God of War 2 territory. And I think it's because it just overshadows the original so much.
Yeah. And I almost wonder if I'm doing that too when I'm thinking about it. I mean, I'm not trying to, I'm walking back everything I say today. I got to stop this. I like this game. I like this franchise. I don't think I've played all of them. I know I even played the one that was on the PSP. And it was good.
Chains of Olympus.
Right, yeah. It was a good game.
Well, there were two on the PSP. I played the first one, but I didn't play the second one.
I played the one you just mentioned, Chains of Olympus, which I think is the first one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they did that Ascension, which I also didn't play. I've played 3 of the 5 games that have been released so far. Because at some point, you don't need all those prequels.
Right.
They're all prequels.
And there's Ghosts of Sparta.
That's the one, yeah.
Well, Ascension's also one.
Yeah, like literally, like the 2 PSP games and Ascension are all prequels. And it's like, all right, guys.
Yeah. And isn't this one too?
The upcoming one is, no, it's many years after God of War 3.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even hesitate to recommend this game to people if I thought the content wouldn't bother them, right? I mean, that's always kind of the caveat with this stuff, is you have to know what you're in for. Some people
This
are
is a
just
whole
going to be
nother
like,
era, though. So
I am turned off by this. And I'm like, okay, then do not play it. And that's okay. I mean, you be you. But as far as the game itself goes, I mean, I do like the sort of dark spin on a lot of of that pantheon, right? Like, of some of these characters being completely unhinged. And it's like, wow, you know, when you think about what they did, that makes a lot of sense to represent them this way. It did have some clever stuff to it.
I mean, I think we as gamers tend to overuse the word epic, but I think epic is the perfect word to use to describe any of the God of War games.
This is an epic.
Yeah. And, you know, and also one thing that I thought was really cool is that, at least on the original God of War, it had a ton of unlockable content after you beat the game, as far as like behind the scenes stuff. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, Angela, about like getting to play the early access version of Warhammer. There's a whole museum where you can look at like old character models of stuff, and like the Cyclops was going to have a giant dick flopping around. And then like they decided against that. And they had like all these different designs, and you could walk up to each one of them and have notes from David Jaffe about why this didn't work and stuff like that. And there was even like some videos of levels that got cut. And then there was, like a story bit that actually talks about, and I don't know why they've never gone to this, but there's a story bit that tells you about Kratos having a brother who was actually, let's see, how did it work? I think he died in childbirth. Or something like that. He died and Kratos never knew about him, but he grew up in Hades and had spent his entire life resenting Kratos being the one that got to live and have all these adventures and stuff like that, and had basically like amassed a following in Hades and was coming for Kratos. And I was like, why didn't y'all do anything with that? That's a really neat concept.
All right. Yeah.
It's like the placenta being separated at birth and getting a mind of its own.
Yeah, or like on Venture Brothers, like Dr. Venture's twin being inside of him like his whole life and then coming out. And
or there's the Simpson Treehouse of Horror where Bart has a brother that was kept in the attic the whole time.
Yeah.
I think what I mean as far as this goes is why, like, I you're right. I don't think I'm as high on it as like you two are. But I think it's because I keep going there expecting it to get a little bit deeper than it does. Like, it hints at things that show a lot of thought and a lot of insight and a lot of cleverness.
They're really good puzzles.
Right, and there's some of that too, but it doesn't feel like... I don't feel like that carries over through the whole game. I feel like I expect that level of depth throughout, and it mostly just comes in these spikes. And I... I think that's a good way to say it, right? And I don't think it's bad necessarily, but it leaves me with a feeling like, ooh, this could have been better. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I will say, so we're going to move on to listener comments, but before we do that, we have to talk about Kratos as a character, I think, especially with the comments that we have coming up.
Okay.
Because they are almost all about how much they hate Kratos. I would say every comment except for maybe 2 are framed around that. Now, going back, I remember going back to the HD collection and playing 1 and 2 in order and being very surprised at how reserved Kratos was in the first game. And I feel, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel that when people talk about how much they hate Kratos as a character and like, you know, how terrible he is and how angry he is and how, you know, much he like, just like does stuff out of rage, that they're talking about him from God of War 2 and 3 especially. 3, he's beyond the pale. Like he is, but also I don't think you're ever supposed to like Kratos, because even in God of War 1, like when he gets Ares to save him, he's not like a do-gooder. He's a warlord that, you know, got in over his head and then pledged his life to the God of War. You know, he's not supposed to be a hero. He's an anti-hero. But even then, like, his actions in God of War are very much just in service to his quest. And there's not really a lot of the whole, like, oh, everybody's against me and I'm angry. Like, that's God of War 2 and 3. 3 especially. In 3, like, he's literally destroying the world because he's angry at the gods. Like, you're told that every god that he kills is bringing about the destruction of the world because they're no longer there to, you know, facilitate whatever they're, you know, the god of. But in God of War 1, I think he is a more sympathetic character. I think he's a more reserved character. Again, I don't think that he's supposed to be a likable character.
Right.
But I also don't think that he is, like, worthy of the amount of spite that he has been getting, especially, again, kind of a revisionist history thing now. I was watching old reviews of God of War, one of which was like Alex Navarro over at GameSpot, who now has a lot of shit to talk about Kratos and God of War and stuff like that. But boy, does he love God of War back in 2005. You know, like he's like, oh, Kratos is the coolest anti-hero and he just doesn't give a damn and blah, blah, blah. And I love these quick time events. And it's like, yeah, okay, some of this is not aged well.
Right. I don't want to be that guy, but I always felt uncomfortable with Kratos. I didn't want to say that I didn't enjoy those games. I said I did. But I always felt like uncomfortable with some of the levels he would go to, right? And I think
you have moral or ethical value.
Exactly. And I think there's a disparity that comes into play when somebody is asked to push buttons that make characters do things that they don't want to actually do, right?
Sure.
And there is a certain level of discomfort that comes with that. And I think that's what I was experiencing. And I think maybe reviewers are having a hard time coming to terms with that. The fact that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
like Alex Navarro can say, "Oh, dude, this guy was awesome, and he did this and did this," and come back and later goes, "You know, I didn't really feel 100% cool about that." And that means Kratos is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad thing, and these games are awful. It's like, guys, there's middle ground here.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
Like, you felt uncomfortable doing that, and you're having difficulty reconciling that. Okay, cool. Put that in the review. You know, I totally get behind that. That's probably one of the reasons I have a little trouble with this franchise.
Yeah, like let's be fair. Every God of War game has him doing something pretty nasty to someone who's relatively innocent.
Does not deserve it, right?
Yeah, like I definitely remember the one where he like has to get the old man's blood like to open this like doorway or something, and he just like bashes the guy's head over and over into this like tablet type thing. But but then there's some like I think God of War 1 is the one where you have, I think it's the Trial of Sisyphus, and you're like basically pushing this guy up this hill and he's in a cage. But it's like, I always thought of it as like, well, he exists for this, right? Like he was put there by the god specifically for this thing. Right. And it sucks, but that's actually more of like, cause the gods are shitty too. Like it's not, and Kratos is just like, well, I gotta do this to get past this part, and do the thing. Now, granted, by God of War 3, there's a part that's like just reprehensible where he like beats the crap out of this woman for a puzzle and stuff like that and kills her. And there seems to be like, yeah, you probably could have gotten around this a different way. But, but I think that his character by that point is also indefensible. Like I can defend God of War 1 Kratos. God of War 2 Kratos, I'm like, okay, this guy's, God of War 3, like I'm like, no, I hate everything about this character in God of War 3 and, also didn't like the game as much as a result. But also there's other things where like the game doesn't feel as good as the first two games, but that's neither here nor there.
Right.
It's a little slower.
Yeah, and just some of the stuff just feels off. Like the jumping feels really off. I noticed that right off the bat. I was like, let me go do this double jump to go cross this. I'm dead. Okay, let me try this double jump again to get across this. Oh, I'm dead again. That doesn't feel good at all. Like I don't know what happened here because his double jumps were fine in the last game. I don't think he had double jump in the first game.
Doesn't he get it in the first game? Like it's something he gets from somebody or something? Maybe
he gets it in the first game. It's the Icarus wings.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is another thing he didn't need to do necessarily. It's like he was.
Well, Icarus didn't need to do that.
Sure, Icarus had his
either.
problems, but he didn't need that. He wasn't doing anything bad to you.
Do we have any closing thoughts before we move on to listener comments?
Maybe just those bad things. I mean, the unnecessary violence is what makes him like the total God of War. He understands what we don't. That's what makes us not the God of War.
Yeah.
No, I think there are directorial missteps in that respect, but I do think that discomfort of you pressing buttons to make a character do things that you find terrible and repugnant is interesting. And I wish they went somewhere with that too. Like that's something that we could have, I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the whole, like, what if you could talk to the demons in freaking Doom? Like, I don't want to go there, but I'm like, yeah, think about that a little bit. Maybe
well, that would, and I don't have any basis for this, but think back to BioShock where like, when you're dealing with Sander Cohen and he's having you do all this stuff and you have to do it because that's how you progress in the game. But you start to think like, I don't feel good about this. I don't like doing this, which is also ties into the meta commentary on that video game. And maybe there's a little bit, maybe God of War influenced that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like maybe they were like, hey, I like this action game, but I also feel really conflicted about the stuff they're making me do sometimes. And maybe someone on the team for BioShock was like, hey, let's work that in. Maybe Ken Levine thought that. Like, I don't know. Like, it's an interesting thought. I think you can run with that. And even if they didn't, you can definitely run with it in the future.
That gets back to where I was before, is I feel like they were on the cusp of that. Like, those sort of the germs of that idea were there, but they never grew into anything. Right.
And now, having just like tried to defend the character a little bit, at least in the first video game, I will be the first to say that, with this new God of War coming out, with him having this really cool axe that you can throw and then summon back to you, how much cooler would it be if you were just playing as Thor? Like, and not have Kratos in it at all? Like, let's just do God of War is a franchise that people know, and let's just do a new God of War, guys.
It might go there.
Yeah, but not
If
Thor.
we haven't played it yet, it might go there.
I mean, maybe. I'm sure that
God of Thor.
I'm sure you encounter Thor and stuff like that in this game, but it's like, how much cooler would it be if you were just Thor?
I'm pretty sure you're gonna kill Thor.
Dude, the way you kill Hercules in God of War 3 is so brutal.
It's messed up.
Okay, moving on to listener feedback. We don't have a lot of it on this one, surprisingly, but over at pixelbit.com, first one comes from Tyrone Swift, who says, "Oh man, I have some things to say about God of War. I'm going to start by saying Kratos is one of my least favorite video game characters of all time. I believe I once said he is the Roman Reigns of video games, and I completely stand by this." That is a very unpopular wrestler, if people don't know who Roman Reigns is. He says, "I do not get what people like about him at all. Is it because he's gray? Is it because when he has sex, he gains experience orbs? I don't know. All I know is I'm supposed to root for a guy who killed his wife and child because he was mind freaked by Ares while he was killing other people's wives and children. What a great guy. I don't understand what Athena, who I'm now convinced is Vince McMahon of video games, sees in this asshole. I would be fine with all of this, if he was the bad guy in the next game, but nope. We must push Kratos. Kratos is money. All that aside, the gameplay in this game is fine. It did some really innovative things with QuickTime events. I personally think I could stomach the game more if it were just a few hours shorter, as the combat becomes very repetitive after a while. I gave up on God of War shortly after the puzzle where you have to push some soldier in a cage into some fire or something. I don't remember. I had kind of checked out at that point. Overall, it's an okay game. I appreciate what it's doing. I appreciate what it contributed to games at the time, but fuck Kratos. Seriously, fuck that guy.
I mean, he's right to an extent, though. Like you were saying, Kratos is not. He starts off as an anti-hero, but then becomes something much worse towards the end.
He does, yeah.
So
Yeah, the common theme all of us were saying as far as the good points of the game were concerned was the game, not really the guy.
And that's another thing, right? Maybe we're so too used to having characters have redemptive arcs that when we see a character have a destructive one, we don't know how to process it.
Yeah, maybe that's kind of the point. Like, maybe by God of War 3, you're supposed to hate him. To that point, I don't want him to have this redemptive arc that he seems to be getting in this new game. Because that seems very much from what I've heard of the game, like, oh, now he's so sympathetic and he's so broken up.
He's got a baby.
Yeah, and it's like, I mean, okay, I really wish he was just Thor. But I do disagree with Tyrone saying that, like, the gameplay is repetitive and like, I really think that the combat in the God of War games is so good. And also, especially moving into the 7th generation from the 6th, the 7th generation had a lot of problem with weight behind attacks where there didn't seem to be any. And when you hit an enemy in God of War, you feel like you hit that enemy. Like, there's just like a purpose and a weight between every attack, no matter what weapon he's using. And it just feels so satisfying. So I've always been a big fan of the God of War combat.
Yeah, I like the chains.
Yeah. It's a really cool weapon.
I think there were parts that felt repetitive. I do remember feeling that way a couple of times during it. I don't think it was, for me, and I don't know, again, people's experiences are different. I think a few times where I was like, all right, I'm done with this. I've done this a few times now. This can move on. But I don't feel like that was an overwhelming feeling I had playing the game. I felt like it just popped up once in a while. I will say that, like, playing it through again on the HD collection, one of the things that I ran into a lot in the first game that got repetitive and a little boring was you fight so many of the medium-sized minotaurs, and you kind of have to do the same, like, quick-time event to kill them. I mean, you can try to just, like, slash them until they die, but it's not the most efficient way to take care of them. So having to see that animation over and over and over, because you fight a lot of them in God of War 1. That stuff, yeah, that could be better. And I think, you know, we could have a whole hour on QuickTime events, but I think that overall I'm for them, but I also think that you need to have more variation in the animations and the button prompts in order to make them interesting and fresh throughout an entire game. Mm-hmm. Next up is San Andreas, who says, I'm actually going to second Tyrone's opinion on God of War. The gameplay was okay, but Kratos was thoroughly unlikable as a character. I know he's an anti-hero of sorts, but I disliked his design and characterization, which came off to me as extreme angry dude bro asshole. Very strong to where it's kind of off-putting to the series as a whole. For that kind of game, I much prefer the Bayonetta series.
Shame, too. I was into Greek mythology when I was adolescent and still have a fondness for Greek mythology. And I thought it was cool that they got Kevin Sorbo, TV's Hercules, to do Hercules in God of War 3. The game is high quality. I just didn't enjoy it. That's fair.
I didn't know that was Kevin Sorbo. That's interesting.
I think I remember hearing that at the time, and I was like, oh, that's really cool.
That's fun.
Because I was a big fan of the Hercules show.
Yeah, that was a good show.
It does not hold up.
Oh, that's a shame.
At all.
I was never a big fan. I didn't know that.
Next up is Extrian, who says, God of War was great, but I didn't care much for Kratos. I'm detecting a theme. He says, Devil May Cry's Dante was better. The QTEs were really cool, even though Resident Evil did them first, and over-the-top violence was just what I wanted as a teen. Looking back, I don't think his character would hold up at all today. If you want to get real old school, Shenmue did it before Resident Evil 4. I like Kratos better than Dante. I'm sorry. I think Dante is so shallow of a character, like in those original games. He is one note. And it's not even an interesting note, where honestly, I think the best thing that happened to Dante was DMC. I think that version of Dante is what that character needed to actually be an interesting character.
I don't know. I would say that what Dante has that Kratos does not is some sort of weird ass charm.
Sure.
There's something charming about him versus Kratos has no charm. None.
That's okay. Yeah, I'll give you that.
And that's what makes Kratos so charming. I think that's what every marketer said.
But for personalities.
Well, lastly, on Twitter, we got a long DM from Red Venom at Zakeli7. I'm not going to read the whole thing for time, but I found this very interesting. He says, I have to say I cheated this week and took a peek at the Pixelbit submissions on the Pack Watch. And since there's a shared opinion on Kratos being a bad protagonist, if not the worst, I would like to offer an alternate opinion. Kratos' story is based on the Heracles, read Hercules, Greek story, where after returning home from some adventure, he finds his town invaded and is tricked by Hera into a rage so great that he kills his wife and child. And after, to atone for his sin, he starts the 12 labors of fame. That being said, is Kratos a one-note, I'm mad, violence is the answer to all problems guy? Yes. Was he doomed, destined from the start to be a pawn in the gods' hands, as all Greek heroes? Yes. Is he not, like so many more before him, a badass with an iconic armor and weapon, Doom Guy, Gordon Freeman, etc., that uses ultra-violence to advance from level to level? Counting only the original God of War game, Kratos is not a bad or boring game protagonist. Kratos may be a bad guy in his game by the end, but he is not a bad protagonist. Yes, that I think is fair, and that's kind of what I was getting at, is that I don't think you're supposed to like him,
right? But
that doesn't make him, a bad character for, the story that they're trying to tell. And, we might be reading too much into this, maybe, I don't think they knew that they were going to do a trilogy or anything like that, but, as the thing goes on, maybe you are supposed to like him even less as the series goes on. Maybe that's kind of the point, is like you were saying, Angelo, it's not a redemption arc, it's the other direction.
Right.
He's just gonna dig this hole deeper until he's gone, which, that's really how it should have ended. The ending to God of War 3 was great until the after credits sting, and it's come on, guys. No, you ended it perfectly, and then you screwed it up, and now we've got another one with this asshole.
I hope this one's gonna be like Metal Gear Solid 2, and maybe that's what the Pack Watch of the Mega Buster of Destiny is trying to tell us, that Kratos is going to die right at the beginning. It's going to be Thor or something.
It would be interesting if somehow you ended up playing as the kid, and maybe the kid was Thor or something like that.
Thor is Raiden.
Yeah. You get the Raiden trick all over again.
I am so worried about the kid in that game, because every bit that I've seen with him talking is this is Jake Lloyd in episode 1 levels of bad. His performance just seems terrible to me. And I've heard people say, oh no, he's really good and everything. And it's all right, I'll take your word for it, because I am not seeing it so far.
Seems kind of annoying to me.
Yes.
I hate to say that, but we'll see.
And also oddly modern in the way that he talks. To me, seems very much like a 10-year-old kid from 2018 and not from Norse Middle Ages.
I didn't pick up on that, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait and see on this one, but I will just say that Raiden was also into lightning.
There you go.
Fair enough.
I have the game pre-ordered, but I won't be playing it. I'm not even hooking up my systems until just before we record our next episode. But by then, I should hopefully be able to say something about God of War on the next Consumption Junction. But it'll just be sitting in my apartment for a while without being played. hopefully I can avoid spoilers. Before we move on to picking the next game for Pack Watch, obviously this is a PlayStation exclusive, so you're not going to have as many ways to play it. If you're looking to track it down, but on the original PS2 disc, you can find that used from anywhere from $5 to $15. I've actually seen ones as low as like $2, but that seemed to be an outlier. So I'd say 5 to 15 is what you're going to find it at. PS3 actually had 2 HD collections of the God of War series. The original one, which is just God of War 1 and 2, goes for about $15 to $40, depending on, what you see. Then there's the God of War Saga, which has those 3 games, it has God of War 1, 2, and 3, and then the 2 PSP games, all in one set. That's going to run you between $20 and $40. And then again, the Vita, I didn't realize that they released the HD collection on Vita, but, that is going to run you $25 to $40, again, because I think Vita physical games are getting to that point where they're starting to go up in price because they didn't make very many. So those
collector.
Yeah, if you're a collector, you might want to speculate in the Vita physical game market because that was not how people were buying Vita games if they bought them at all. So just keep that in mind.
I have exactly 0 Vita physical games.
I have 2. I bought Corpse Party New because it came with like the soundtrack and everything. And I have a used copy of Final Fantasy X HD collection because of course I do.
As he fondles his Mega Buster.
Yes. I am about to crack open the Mega Buster of Destiny to reveal the next Pack Watch game, guys. Favorite part of the show. Not even kidding. All the rest.
Can you hear it?
All the rest of the show, it's just filler. It all comes down to just like swirling around in the Mega Buster.
What's next?
This one will be a quicker one, but next time on Nerds Without Pants, we are going to be discussing the original arcade version of Final Fight.
Ooh. Right?
Okay.
So look forward to that. If you have any stories, anecdotes, or memories of Final Fight, get those to us on pixelbit.com in the show thread for episode 133 or at Twitter or at NWPcast. Again, we're going to want those by 7:30 Central Time, May 17th. We're going to have a little bit of a break because I'm going to be out of town. But again, there'll be a special. So, and Angela, what are we doing for Stage Select that episode?
Sure. I want wrestler themes for people. I want entry music for Julian, Patrick, and myself. Whoever you come up with, one of us, all of us, video game music. Just try to keep it video game related, but if you can't, that's fine too. Just let us know what you think. If you got something real clever, whatever. Just want to hear it. It'll be fun.
That will be fun. So, look forward to that, everybody. And, thanks again to everybody who reviewed the show, followed us on Twitter, retweeted us, commented on the show, submitted to Stage Select and Pack Watch. You're helping in more ways than you can possibly imagine. So I appreciate everyone who gives us feedback in any way. That's going to do it for this episode. You can always find us individually on Twitter. Patrick?
I'm at some boss, and you could find me on Instagram as well. Just search my name.
Don't you want to do it? At Boomlens.
Yeah, or my name, whatever.
Oh, will it pop up with your name? I don't know Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah, it's easier there.
Okay. Angelo?
I'm at A Roguish Ham, if I'm still on Twitter, because that place is frustrating.
Yeah.
I post pictures.
Yeah. You can find me at Julian_Titus, although I've pretty much put my account in private mode at this point, so yeah. Had some issues.
Blew up too fast, huh, Julian?
No, just
wasn't ready for Jay.
Just Twitter is trash.
Yeah, it's really hard to have a discussion with people who change the point of the discussion and are arguing that point when you're talking about something completely different. It just gets really annoying. So, anyway,
then they say it's like something about your character. So it's just so funny the way that arguments can change in the middle of them sometimes.
Mm-hmm. So that's going to do it for this episode of Nerds Without Pants. For myself, Patrick, and Angelo, thanks for listening, and keep it pantsless, Internet. Bye.